Chapter 680. The time was 8:30 in the morning, in a coffee shop outside Feng Yunshan's company. At this time, 3 people are sitting opposite each other, and these 3 people are all related to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai's wife in name, Qi Li, Jiang Hai's first lover, his junior high school classmate Feng Yunshan, Jiang Hai's second lover, Ai Xiaoxi. It's really awkward for these 3 people to sit together. Although they are already very familiar with each other, their relationship is very subtle. Why are you looking for us? Finally, Ai Xiaoxi couldn't hold back. She put down the spoon that stirred the coffee cup in front of her and looked up at Qi Li. Hearing her words, Qi Li and Feng Yunshan also put down the things in their hands. It seems that the topic is finally about to start. Jiang Hai called me, I'm going to Winthrop tomorrow. When Jiang Hai confirmed the company's registration, it was almost 12 o'clock. It's noon in the United States, but it's midnight in China. At that time, he also sent a message to Qi Li, but Qi Li saw it this morning. After seeing it, she had already decided to go to Winthrop, but not today, because she has to arrange the company's affairs today. She booked a ticket for tomorrow, but before going, it doesn't prevent her from meeting Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunshan first. Jiang Hai asked you to go? Hearing what she said, Feng Yunshan asked with some doubts. She didn't understand why Jiang Hai asked Qi Li to go. Hearing what she said, Qi Li also nodded proudly. Then why did you ask us to come here this time? To warn us, or do you have something to say? Looking at Qi Li's appearance, Ai Xiaoxi, whose mentality has changed a lot, couldn't help but frown and ask Qi Li, why did she look for me? I asked you to come here because I want you to go with me. Staring at the 2 women in front of her, Qi Li directly expressed her intention. Why? You should know that we don't seem to have a very harmonious relationship. Hearing Qi Li's words, Feng Yunshan asked with some worry. It could be said that there was a clear hatred between them and Qi Li, but now Qi Li actually wanted to bring them to see Jiang Hai. Why was this? This made them a little confused. Could it be that he wanted to call them over to watch them show off their affection? But thinking about it, Jiang Hai couldn't possibly be like this. He really couldn't understand what Lu Li meant. Just answer me. Are you going or not? Looking at the 2 puzzled women in front of her, Qi Li gently brushed her hair behind her ear and said with a smile. She naturally had her own reasons for wanting to go. As for Feng Yunshan and Ai Xiaoxi, she really didn't care about them. Hearing Qi Li's words, Feng Yunshan and Ai Xiaoxi looked at each other. Both of them were hesitant. You really decided to let Qi Li come over? At this moment, sitting on the bed in Jiang Hai's room, Qi Jia glanced at Qi Ya, who was sitting beside her, and Jiang Hai, who was sitting opposite her. Hearing their words, Jiang Hai also touched his nose slightly awkwardly. Sister, big sister is indeed the person who is most familiar with business operations. Jiang Hai. It's right for brother-in-law to call her over. Gently poking Qi Jia, Qi Ya said to her with a smile, but her calling him brother-in-law gave Jiang Hai goosebumps all over his body. Ai, it's really. Ugh, it's a blessing for me to meet your sister. He said awkwardly, but when he saw Qi Jia and Qi Ya's gaze, he changed his words halfway and shook his head helplessly. He had met the wrong person. It's good that you know. The office is a big deal, just call her over. Rolling her eyes at Jiang Hai, he changed his mind quickly. Qi Jia muttered softly with her chin in her hand. Although she also knew that it was difficult for her to stay with Qi Li by Jiang Hai's side, then are you going to tell Qi Li the truth about our relationship? Looking at Qi Jia and Qi Ya, Jiang Hai thought for a while and said to them. Tell the truth? No, I'm not going to do that. She shook her head. The relationship between Qi Jia and Qi Li was not particularly good. If this layer of relationship was added, then it would be even more confusing. Then are you leaving? Listening to Qi Jia's words, Jiang Hai was confused, and then asked with some confusion. He did not mean to drive away other women because of his woman. In Jiang Hai's heart, although he did not treat everyone equally, he would definitely not do such a thing. However, in Jiang Hai's view, this was really troublesome. I'm not leaving, I'm going back to Miami temporarily. Since I've decided to stay here for a long time, I'm going back to sell my research institute. The things inside also need to be cleaned up. Qi Jia glanced at Jiang Hai and said very indifferently. But Jiang Hai could hear the disappointment and reluctance in her words. After all, they had been together for a long time, and she had also lived here for a long time. We can't always be like this. Otherwise, let's just tell the truth. Looking at her appearance, Jiang Hai bit his lip. He hated people like this very much. Instead of this, it was better to be direct. So he thought for a while, and said to Qi Jia and Qia. The three sisters, so be it. Anyway, things had already happened. What else could Jiang Hai say? It was impossible for him to deny anything. Let's talk about it later. At least before Qi Li is ready to live here, we are still your sisters-in-law. Okay, you can make an appointment with Qi Li. We will leave tomorrow. Looking at Jiang Hai's decision in front of her, Qi Jia also smiled. In fact, she wanted Jiang Hai's answer more. Now that Jiang Hai had said the answer, there was no need for her to say more. Jiang Hai was mentally prepared, but she wasn't ready yet. She needed to think about it carefully. Tonight, you have to feed me until I'm full. Thinking of this, Qi Jia stood up and took the initiative to sit on Jiang Hai's lap. She said to Jiang Hai with a confused look. At the same time, she gave Qia a look, telling her to leave and close the door. However, Qia did close the door, but she did not leave. Instead, she turned back. I also want to live here. Looking at Jiang Hai and Qi Jia, Qia whispered. After hearing this, Qi Jia could not help but feel her heart skip a beat. Then, she slapped Jiang Hai's chest. She was wondering why Xiaoya and Jiang Hai had been acting strangely recently. It turned out that something had happened to them. You bastard, we three sisters. Are you not going to let any of us go? Qi Jia said angrily as she glared at Jiang Hai. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also smiled awkwardly and did not talk back. Instead, he directly hugged Qi Jia in front of him and kissed her affectionately. As Qi Jia's gaze drifted away, Qia also walked over. After taking off her coat, she hugged Jiang Hai from behind and gently bit his ear. Recently, she had been holding it in for a long time. Jiang Hai had been very busy. It was a silent night. In fact, there was no way to talk about it. If they wrote about what they said, the book would be banned. When Jiang Hai woke up the next morning, Qi Jia and Qia had already left. The one who sent them off was Azalina. In fact, Jiang Hai had already woken up very early, but he did not choose to come downstairs to send them off because he did not know how to face them. So after confirming that they had left, Jiang Hai came downstairs. In the villa, Delina and Marian went to send Qi Jia and Qia off, leaving only Prawalton and Cheryl Lee. Seeing Jiang Hai coming down, Prawalton also went up to him. She completely ignored Jiang Hai's slightly melancholy gaze. She wrapped her arms around his neck and took the initiative to kiss him. Doesn't your wife know about what happened between you and other women? Why did you send them away? After their lips parted for a long time, Prawalton looked at the sad Jiang Hai and couldn't help but say with a smile. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai could only shrug. Because there were some words that he couldn't say. After all, these things were quite embarrassing to talk about. It doesn't matter. You have been in a state of use for the past few days. I thought I was going to come in vain. Your wife will come tomorrow, but today, you belong to us. Seeing that Jiang Hai didn't answer, Prawalton didn't care. After chuckling, she directly pushed Jiang Hai onto the sofa. Compared to the bed, she preferred other places. As for Cheryl Lee, after watching the flames of war reignite here, she also joined the battle group. She liked Prawalton, but she also liked Jiang Hai. For that kind of thing, she also enjoyed it. The flames of war reignited in the living room of the villa. In the evening, Pra Walton and Cheryl Lee also entered Jiang Hai's room. This was the first time they did this kind of thing in Jiang Hai's room, but if they didn't get used to sleeping on the jade bed, it would really be a trap. The next morning, when Jiang Hai left, they also got up, but they didn't wake up. They were woken up by the bed and went back to their rooms to sleep. After instructing Aphrodite and the others to help clean the room, Jiang Hai drove his battle shield and headed to New York. On the way, Jiang Hai casually bought 2 burritos to fill his stomach and rushed all the way. At about 10:00 in the morning, he arrived at New York's LaGuardia Airport. Looking at the time, there was still more than an hour before the flight arrived, so he wasn't too late. So Jiang Hai sat in the car and played with his mobile phone. Unknowingly, more than an hour had passed. As Chi Li's phone rang, Jiang Hai also answered the phone. After asking about the location, Jiang Hai closed the door and walked into the waiting hall. But as soon as he came in, he saw 4 women standing together and walking out. When he saw who these 4 women were, Jiang Hai couldn't help but feel a drop of cold sweat on his forehead. Jiang Hai knew these 4 people. Chi Li, this was inevitable. The person next to her was her assistant. Until now, Jiang Hai didn't know her name. Jiang Hai was also familiar with the other 2 people, Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunchen. Jiang Hai couldn't understand why they were here. "Oh, you're here. Are you tired?" Seeing the 4 people coming in front of him, Jiang Hai smiled and greeted them. Although he was surprised why Feng Yunchen and Ai Xiaoxi came, since they were here, Jiang Hai couldn't ask here, so he went forward to pick up the luggage. But with this, he awkwardly found that he didn't know who to pick up. Whether it was Feng Yunchen, Ai Xiaoxi, or Chi Li, they all brought a big bag of luggage. Seeing this, Jiang Hai was really embarrassed. "Go and get a trolley." Looking at Jiang Hai's embarrassed look, Chi Li couldn't help but glare at him. This guy likes to flirt. This time, I'll let him see the disadvantages of having too many women. But fortunately, she just looked at Jiang Hai awkwardly for a while, then she helped Jiang Hai out of the awkward situation. Oh. Hearing Chi Li's words, Jiang Hai immediately ran to a distance and pushed a trolley over. He loaded the luggage of the 4 people into the trolley, then pushed it out of the airport. After leaving the airport, they naturally took their luggage down and carried it themselves. They came to Jiang Hai's car. After putting the luggage in the car, the 5 people also sat in the car together. Although Jiang Hai's battle shield was a standard seat for 5 people, because the car was really big, Chi Li sat in the front passenger seat, and the 3 people sitting behind her didn't feel crowded at all. However, Jiang Hai still felt that the atmosphere in the car was quite awkward. He wanted to find something to say, but he found that he didn't seem to have anything to say. It was better to stay silent. In the end, it was Chi Li who spoke first. She looked at Jiang Hai and said with a serious face, "Can you talk about the progress on your side?" Hearing Chi Li's words, Jiang Hai also had a rare opportunity to speak. "Oh, progress. I went to Moses Adams the day before yesterday, and the company has been registered. It's called Tinglong Company, and the brand is also called Tinglong. It's mainly to promote my beef and seafood and form a brand effect. The registration capital is $3 million, and it should be approved soon. Do you have any opinions or suggestions?" Hearing Chi Li's words, Jiang Hai also had a rare opportunity to speak. "Soaring Dragon, although it's a bit old-fashioned, it's not bad. Now that the company has not come down, everything is just talk. After the company comes down, you have to decide what your company will do. In fact, in my opinion, there is no special need for you to promote your brand. Pra Walton, I have the sea market, we can scrape your meat clean, and we can also buy your seafood. So what you said about promotion is not necessary. You just have to ensure the effect of your brand, and your company. I think it's better to do transportation." After listening to Jiang Hai's words, Chi Li thought for a moment and then said to him. Chapter 681. Transportation. Listening to Chi Li's words, Jiang Hai fell into contemplation while driving. Yes, transportation. After you win the award, the necessary publicity is necessary, but you don't have to worry about your transportation. Although I don't want to admit it, Walton will solve your problem of mass transportation. Haisheng Supermarket and I are enough to solve your remaining supply. In the future, even if you raise more and more cows, we can still eat them. But there is one thing that we can't earn, and that is the money for logistics. Qi Li heard that. Jiang Hai listened and explained to him. Not all companies were like Walton, which had many planes, whether it was Qi Li or Haisheng Supermarket. They didn't have private cargo planes. If they wanted to distribute the beef everywhere, Haisheng Supermarket needed to use the Walmart Group's channels. In this way, they would naturally lose some money and the initiative of the beef. Similarly, Qi Li also needed to spend money to transport the beef back from the United States. Not only was it expensive, but most importantly, it was time-consuming. It was not worth it. Therefore, instead of handing this business to others, it was better to hand it over to Jiang Hai directly. Jiang Hai's company didn't need to do anything else. It only needed to deliver the beef to domestic or Haisheng Supermarket on time, and it could also take some private jobs. The money for private jobs was enough for the normal operation of the company. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but touch his chin. This might be a good idea. Jiang Hai was already a little tempted, but after going back, he had to discuss it with Walton and Zhang Dihai. Walton definitely wouldn't use Jiang Hai's logistics, but Zhang Dihai could. And if he didn't use it, then Jiang Hai's logistics company would only deliver the beef to Qi Li. It seemed that the loss outweighed the gain. It's possible to set up a logistics company. We'll discuss it when we get back. But the problem is, I don't know how to start a company. It's such a small company. You can't possibly come and take charge of it. What should I do? After thinking about it, Jiang Hai felt that this thing was quite reliable, but he still didn't understand the person in charge of this company. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li smiled. Come, let me introduce you. This is Jing Jin, my assistant. She has been with me for many years and is quite capable. This time, I brought her here mainly to let her work in your company. If you agree, she can help you manage the company. With a smile, Qi Li pointed to the somewhat absent-minded assistant behind her and said to Jiang Hai. It was the first time Jiang Hai knew that the assistant was called Jing Jin. He didn't pay attention before. Following Qi Li's finger, Jiang Hai also glanced through the rearview mirror. Maybe she heard Qi Li's words. Jing Jin also turned her head, looked at Jiang Hai, and nodded gently. Let's talk about it when we get back. But looking at her, Jiang Hai didn't say much, because Jiang Hai didn't have a good impression of her. When he was with Qi Li, this girl was always in his way. Although she didn't humiliate him in front of his face, Jiang Hai still remembered the look in her eyes. For Qi Li's sake, Jiang Hai didn't want to lower himself to her level. However, it was impossible for him to have a good impression of her. Now that he wanted to hand over his company to her, Jiang Hai had to think about it. Jiang Hai didn't mind. Hearing Jiang Hai say this, Qi Li also chuckled. She knew the conflict between Jiang Hai and her assistant, but she had no choice. First, she completely trusted her assistant. Second, she also needed to arrange someone in Jiang Hai's new company. This was not because she was worried about Jiang Hai, but because she was worried about other people. She was very clear about Jiang Hai's character. As for the company, after he set it up, he would probably leave it there and no longer care about it. If he found someone he didn't trust, it was likely that he would take the company away. So even if it was for Jiang Hai, she had to let Jiang Hai keep Jing Jin. Soon, Jiang Hai changed the topic. In the middle of March, New York and Boston were pretty good. Although there were still a little points, most of the land had been exposed. New seedlings were growing, and the roadside trees were budding. Everywhere was lush, and it was really beautiful. Jiang Hai talked about his newly bought cattle and the seafood he had salvaged. For a while, the atmosphere in the car was very good. A few hours later, Jiang Hai's car returned to Winthrop's manor. After arriving at the manor, Jiang Hai stopped the car and helped them carry their luggage into the villa. As soon as they walked in, they saw Prawalton, Cheryl Lee, Delina, Marion, and Azalina in the villa at this time. "Hey, my darlings, how are you?" Looking at the 5 people in the house, Chili first nodded to Prawalton and Cheryl Lee, then smiled at Azalina. She then walked to Jiang Hai's 2 daughters, Delina and Marion. She hugged the 2 daughters and said with a smile. Because they had seen each other more often, Delina, Marion, and Chili were also familiar with each other. Although they didn't call her mother, they also smiled and chatted with her. On the other hand, Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunshan were a little stupefied because they didn't know Prawalton and Cheryl. Most importantly, they couldn't speak English. Among these foreigners, only Delina and Marion could speak some Chinese. Azalina only knew a little about it, so she stood there awkwardly. Fortunately, Azalina was very helpful. She pulled them to sit down and used her simple Chinese to make the 2 girls gradually relax. As for Jiang Hai, seeing that there was nothing to do here, he took their luggage and arranged rooms for them. Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunshan were going to stay in the same room where they stayed last time. Although people came and went in Jiang Hai's house, the rooms were very fixed. This was because there were a lot of rooms. The last time they came, they stayed in this room. But just as they were about to arrange a room for Qi Li and Jing Jin, Qi Li stood up and threw her luggage into Jiang Hai's room. This action was clearly a declaration of sovereignty. Everyone couldn't help but be surprised. However, Qi Li appeared to be very calm. After throwing away her luggage, she sat down and started chatting again. As for Jing Jin, she went to the last room. It could be seen that she was still very unsociable. It was understandable. These women had some kind of relationship with Jiang Hai, but she didn't. It was very awkward for her to stay here. While they were chatting, Jiang Hai also called old master Zhang Dihai. Recently, Jiang Hai often went to China, so he rarely went to old master Zhang's small supermarket to buy things because most of them were sent from China. However, the relationship between the 2 didn't break. A while ago, Jiang Hai went to get some tea leaves. But speaking of which, it was almost the Qingming festival. Jiang Hai's tea leaves should be the first batch. Thinking about the tea leaves he planted, Jiang Hai was a little excited. He didn't know how they would taste. Jiang Hai was afraid that these tea leaves would be blown by the wind and frozen by the snow, so he specially planted them in a warehouse. The temperature was adjusted to the best standard. The soil used was also the most fertile water here. Moreover, he specially watered it with water that was filled with Jiang Hai's spiritual energy. He hoped that the taste of these tea leaves could satisfy Jiang Hai. The topic was digressed again. Jiang Hai called old master Zhang Dihai, not to exchange pleasantries, but to tell him about his establishment of a company and that his company was going to do transportation. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Zhang Dihai agreed on the other side. For him, transportation was also a headache. Although Walmart's channel was good, it was really troublesome. Not to mention the money, this was inevitable. Although Jiang Hai's transportation would be cheaper, it also had to be charged. However, everything had to be done according to the time of Sam's Club, which made him a little depressed. For example, when he went there, sometimes the meat in his store was sold out, but the meat in Sam's Club was not sold out, so he had to wait. When the meat in his store was not sold out, but the meat in Sam's Club was sold out, then they would come in. It was really troublesome. If Jiang Hai could be responsible for the transportation, it would naturally be better. It could also ensure freshness and time. Thinking of this, Zhang Dihai agreed instantly. This was also a good thing for him, so he was very happy. After getting Zhang Dihai's consent, Jiang Hai was relieved. During dinner, Jiang Hai also explained the situation in the restaurant. When Prawalton learned that Jiang Hai wanted to do transportation, she did not object. Instead, she nodded gently. In her opinion, Jiang Hai's transportation was still very good. Just like what Qi Li and Zhang Dihai said, Jiang Hai's transportation was indeed beneficial to them, but it was not good for Pra Walton and Walmart. Originally, they could still receive Zhang Dihai's money, but now Pra Walton's heart was not with Walmart. So when she heard that Jiang Hai wanted to do logistics and transportation, she agreed. She also told Jiang Hai what he needed. Transportation was naturally needed to do transportation. When it came to transportation, the first thing that came to mind was a car. But to be honest, a car did not matter. Because if it was close, whether it was the Haishang supermarket or Qi Li, they could solve it by themselves. It was not like they did not have a car. Pra Walton's transportation was a plane. To be exact, it was a cargo plane. If you wanted to quickly transport the goods to major cities without smelly, a plane was the best choice. Although there was ice, the ice could only last for 7 days. Frozen beef could not be sold at a high price. Speaking of cargo planes, Jiang Hai really did not know much about it. Fortunately, Pra Walton was very clear about it. The so-called cargo plane was the cargo version of a large and medium-sized passenger plane. The biggest difference between a cargo plane and a passenger plane was that there was an F on the model of a cargo plane, which represented a cargo plane. And because of the greater load, it could only take off and land in large and medium-sized airports. It could not take off and land in small airports. In other words, if Jiang Hai wanted to buy a cargo plane, he needed to go to the nearby Boston airport to rent a runway and a hangar there. In addition, he needed to buy a flight route to major cities in the United States. He also needed to talk to the customs so that he could ship to Huaxia. These things were very troublesome. Jiang Hai felt a headache when he heard it, but Jing Jin listened very carefully. She had also been in contact with logistics in China, but these things were mostly done by train, car, or plane. But she was not very clear about the specific operations. Since Pra Walton knew more about it, she would humbly ask for his advice. While they were talking, the night fell unknowingly. Qi Li and the others had been on the plane for more than 10 hours. So everyone looked at the time and went to bed. Naturally, Jiang Hai went back with Qi Li. Although they had just separated not long ago, as soon as Qi Li returned to the room, she pushed Jiang Hai to the door and kissed him heavily. "Hey, you have been on the plane for more than 10 hours, and there are still a few hours in the car. Aren't you tired?" After their lips parted for a long time, Jiang Hai looked at Qi Li, who still wanted more. He couldn't help but smile bitterly. Why does this woman not follow the routine at all? I'm definitely a little tired, but if I don't enjoy myself with you here, I can't sleep. Licking her lips, Qi Li said with a smile. Then, without giving Jiang Hai a chance, she kissed him on the lips again and began to take off her clothes at the same time. Not long after, the two rolled onto Jiang Hai's white jade bed, and the battle began. An hour later, the wind and rain gradually stopped. Jiang Hai also lay on the bed with Qi Li in his arms, letting Qi Li's head rest on his arm. Jiang Hai was also slightly panting, and Qi Li had already closed her eyes. Although she was not asleep yet, her breathing gradually stabilized. "Phew, I really want to stay by your side every day. I'm gradually addicted." Leaning in Jiang Hai's arms, Qi Li whispered. "Then you can stay." Hearing her hand, Jiang Hai's other hand also wrapped around her armpit, pressing one of her breasts and whispering. Feeling Jiang Hai's action, Qi Li couldn't help but pat his hand. Glancing at Jiang Hai, Qi Li closed her eyes again, and said bitterly, "If you're not satisfied, then go find Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunqian. But remember, come back when you go to bed. If I don't see you tomorrow morning, you're dead." Chapter 682. By the way, I don't quite understand. Did they want to come over this time, or did you bring them here? When he heard Qi Li talking about Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunqian, Jiang Hai couldn't help but ask with some doubts. He had been curious about this matter for a whole day. "I called them here." Listening to Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li also replied. "But why?" Hearing Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai was even more puzzled. What kind of trick is this? No reason, I'm willing. However, Qili didn't explain her meaning, which made Jiang Hai a little puzzled. Okay, go quickly, remember to come back and sleep. Looking at Jiang Hai's confused look, Qili kicked him, then closed her eyes and began to sleep. She was really tired. Looking at her appearance, Jiang Hai scratched his head, then slowly walked out of the room. After gently closing the door, Jiang Hai was still a little puzzled. He didn't understand why Qili did this, but Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunqian were also related to him. He couldn't let them wait for too long, so after hesitating, Jiang Hai still went to Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunqian's room. When he came in, Ai Xiaoxi had just finished bathing, but Feng Yunqian hadn't finished yet. You know, the water in Jiang Hai's room is hot spring water. Soaking more is beneficial for the body, so Feng Yunqian likes to soak more there. Seeing Jiang Hai walk in, Ai Xiaoxi was stunned for a moment, then she didn't care about it. She sat on the bed while drying her hair, and looked at Jiang Hai with a smile. Looking at her, Jiang Hai was a little embarrassed. Aren't you going to accompany Qili? At this moment, Ai Xiaoxi asked him with a smile. She told me to come over and accompany you. Scratching his head, Jiang Hai said to Ai Xiaoxi, somewhat at a loss. This Qili is really something. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Ai Xiaoxi patted the seat beside her for Jiang Hai to sit down. She sighed. This Qili really gave her a lot of pressure. In fact, Jiang Hai didn't understand why Qili called them over. However, Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunqian thought about it and roughly guessed that Qili was doing this mainly for 3 goals. Firstly, she wanted to signal to Jiang Hai that she was pregnant. She didn't care about what women Jiang Hai had outside, but she wanted Jiang Hai to come back every day. Secondly, she wanted to show Ai Xiaoxi and the others that mistresses should have the awareness of being mistresses because they couldn't help Jiang Hai. Thirdly, and most importantly, she wanted to show Jiang Hai that she was smart. She wanted to tell Jiang Hai that she would be his think tank. This could be said to be killing 3 birds with 1 stone. She had to admit that when it came to playing mind games, Jiang Hai was really far behind Qili. Forget it, don't think about it anymore. Let me check if you still have the ability to accompany us. Ai Xiaoxi shook her head. She was still too young. Compared to Qili, Ai Xiaoxi felt that she was still lacking a lot. However, this didn't mean that she would admit defeat. Ai Xiaoxi glanced at Jiang Hai and smiled as she leaned on Jiang Hai's legs. She released the part that Jiang Hai had just exercised and gently teased it with her hand before swallowing it. Feeling Ai Xiaoxi's movements, Jiang Hai also closed his eyes and enjoyed it. Sometimes, for a man, having more women wasn't a good thing, unless you had a strong body like Jiang Hai. Not long after, the war drum sounded again in the room. The battle between the 2 armies reached its peak once again. Just when Jiang Hai defeated Ai Xiaoxi, Feng Yunqian heard the noise outside. After taking a bath, she looked outside and couldn't help but chuckle. Then, she joined the battle. It was already around 11:00 in the evening when Jiang Hai left the room. But just as he left the room, he found that Prawalton and Cheryl Lee's doors in the distance were opened. At this time, Cheryl was standing in front of the door, hooking her finger at Jiang Hai. Prawalton was also standing behind her, but his hands were grabbing 2 vital parts of Cheryl's upper body and constantly changing their shape. In fact, the meaning of this was self-evident. Although his feet were already a little light, Jiang Hai couldn't be biased. He gritted his teeth and went into the room. When Jiang Hai appeared in the corridor again, it was already past 12:00. He yawned. To be honest, Jiang Hai was already a little tired. Just as he was about to go back to the room, he suddenly found that in the hall on the 1st floor, someone was holding a phone in a daze. After frowning and looking at it, Jiang Hai found that this person was none other than Jing Jin. What is she doing so late at night? Scratching his head in confusion, Jiang Hai thought for a moment and went downstairs. Hello. Just as Jiang Hai hesitated whether to ask what was going on, the phone in Zheng Jin's hand suddenly rang. Then, with Jiang Hai's hearing, a young male voice came from the phone. "Hello, it's me." After hesitating, Zheng Jin said to the man on the phone. "Oh, you still called me? I thought after you went there, you went to play with your black brothers." At this time, the male voice on the phone couldn't help but say a little frivolously. Hearing this, Zheng Jin's expression was not good. "What nonsense are you talking about? I'm here to work." Hearing the voice on the other side, Zheng Jin said with a face full of anger. "Work? Is work more important or am I more important? Shouldn't we be one? Who allowed you to go to work?" Hearing Zheng Jin's words, the man on the other side roared angrily. Hearing his voice, Zheng Jin couldn't help but be speechless. He didn't know what to say. "You'd better make a decision yourself." Hearing that Zheng Jin was silent, the person on the other side couldn't help but snort coldly. Then, he directly hung up the phone. As for Zheng Jin, after the other party hung up the phone, he seemed to have lost his soul and was somewhat powerless. Sorry, if you have something important to do, I can arrange for you to return to China as soon as possible." Looking at Zheng Jin sitting there powerlessly in the dark night, Jiang Hai thought for a while, then coughed dryly to remind her of his location, and then said to her. From the call just now, it was not difficult for Jiang Hai to guess that there should be something wrong with Zheng Jin's other half. If because of his own affairs, the other party's relationship was delayed, then Jiang Hai felt that it was a little unnecessary. "Oh, it's okay, I'll go back to my room first." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Zheng Jin was stunned for a moment. Then, she turned around and glanced at Jiang Hai. After that, she turned around and walked directly to the second floor and returned to her room without saying anything. She looked like she didn't want to say anything more. Jiang Hai also scratched his head. He had to listen to Qi Li's opinion on this matter. He turned around and returned to his room on the second floor. At this time, Qi Li had already fallen asleep. Jiang Hai also took off his pajamas and went to bed. Just like that, he hugged Qi Li and fell asleep. The next day, Jiang Hai was woken up by Qi Li's hair. When he opened his eyes, he found that Qi Li was lying on top of him at this time, using her hair to sniff his nose. Feeling her movements, Jiang Hai woke up in the morning, and his big brother also woke up. Realizing that her lower body was different, Qi Li's pretty face couldn't help but blush, but she didn't dodge. Looking at her appearance, what else was there to say? The flames of war ignited in the room again. When the flames of war on Jiang Hai's side were extinguished, it was already past 9 in the morning. "Are you a dog? Can't you eat enough?" Lying on top of Jiang Hai, Qi Li gently patted Jiang Hai's chest and then said softly. At this time, she was sweating all over, and her body seemed to have no bones. She was soft and had no strength at all. "Oh, that depends on what you eat." Touching Qi Li's smooth back, Jiang Hai said with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li buried her head deeper. She liked how Jiang Hai treated her, she really liked it. "By the way, what's the matter with Zheng Jin? When I came back last night, I found her on the phone. It seems that the other party is her boyfriend or someone else. Didn't her family allow her to come? Then let her go back." Looking at Qi Li, Jiang Hai remembered Zheng Jin's matter last night, and couldn't help but ask Qi Li. Jiang Hai didn't want to keep a person who didn't have any intention to help him, and he still had to pay her a salary. "Sigh, this matter is indeed a little troublesome, but we can't let her go." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li couldn't help but sigh, and then told Jiang Hai. Speaking of which, Zheng Jin was also a bit unlucky. After she graduated from university, she was recruited by Qi Li and worked at the grassroots for a year. Because of Qi Li's relationship, she was directly promoted to the top. Therefore, she wasn't very proficient in some things like interpersonal relationships, but she was indeed good-looking and capable, so there were indeed a lot of people watching her. Not only were the people in the group watching her, but also the people outside. Moreover, they were right next to Qi Li. Originally, Qi Li could also watch a little, but because she spent more energy on Jiang Hai last year. Jing Jin found a boyfriend without paying attention. This boyfriend was a small boss of their cooperative company, and the two secretly dated for about 3 months. Jing Jin came over and said that she was pregnant. Originally, this boyfriend didn't want the child, so naturally, he didn't want to marry Jing Jin. However, because of Qi Li's pressure, and because his parents also thought that Jing Jin was a good person, and could be considered as an internal staff of Qi Li's. If any news was leaked, it would be a good thing for their family, so they forced this man to marry Jing Jin. However, after getting married, this guy still went out to drink and have fun. Jing Jin once went to his party and he beat Jing Jin up. Moreover, he beat her so badly that she had a miscarriage. After Qi Li found out about this, she directly cut off the cooperation project with their company, which almost made their family bankrupt. This small boss had no choice but to beg Jing Jin to forgive him, and Jing Jin was also a fool, so she forgave him just like that. After that, Qi Li kept a close eye on Jing Jin, but this guy still didn't change his character. On the other hand, Jing Jin was like a punching bag, completely resigned to her fate. This made Qi Li really angry, so this time, after Jiang Hai said that he wanted to start a company, she transferred Jing Jin over. She made this decision because she wanted to make Jing Jin give up and divorce that man. However, now it seemed that Jing Jin didn't give up so easily. After hearing Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai could only chuckle. Although he thought that he was also a scumbag, he didn't seem to be scumbag to this extent. At the same time, he also felt a little pity for Jing Jin in his heart, but a person who was pitiful must have something to hate. Thinking of her attitude toward him back then, Jiang Hai's pity instantly disappeared. A wicked person would be dealt with by another wicked person. Now, he could only say this. However, just as Qi Li said, Jing Jin couldn't go back, so Jiang Hai didn't care. Let her stay here. He would see if she could do this job. If she couldn't, then he would find her an idle job. After all, he still had to give face to Qi Li. After talking about Jing Jin, Jiang Hai and the others also got out of bed. After breakfast, Jiang Hai first took Qi Li and the others to play around in his manor. He also specially went out to sea. The next day, he went to Winthrop, and then went to Boston on the third day. Jiang Hai's company went through the formalities very quickly. After all, Moses Adams was involved. Also, because he wanted to buy a plane and so on, Jiang Hai added an additional $100 million to the investment. Anyway, the money wouldn't bear any children in the bank, so it didn't matter if he invested it a little. With the addition of the money, Moses Adams went through the formalities even faster. The license, tax certificate, business permit, and so on were all completed in 3 days. Then, Jiang Hai rented the 17th floor above Moses Adams' lawyer building as the address of his company. Then, it was time to recruit employees, customize a plaque, decorate a company, and so on. At this time, Qi Li completely delegated the power to Jing Jin. It turned out that Jing Jin's workability was indeed not bad. These things were handed over to her in an orderly manner. Although she was unfamiliar with the place, she had already bought the tables and chairs that afternoon, plus the design, and contacted the construction team. According to her estimate, they could finish the renovation in less than half a month at most. Then, they just had to put the tables and chairs, hire employees, and after 3 weeks, they could officially start business. Jiang Hai was very surprised. This girl was really quite efficient. In that case, he just left the matters here to her. At the same time, Jiang Hai also rented an apartment for her in the company. After all, she had to travel around Boston. It would be inconvenient if she didn't have a place to stay. Chapter 683. Hey, your taxes here are too scary. Walking out of the tax bureau, Qi Li naturally held Jiang Hai's arm, and then said unhappily. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also smiled. He couldn't deny it. The taxes in the United States were indeed too heavy. Just the federal tax alone is daunting enough. Fortunately, Jiang Hai earns a lot more than that. Well, the wool comes from the sheep's back. I pay more money, so my status here is higher. Looking at Qi Li's pouting mouth, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh. Jiang Hai's words were completely correct. The biggest difference between the United States and Huaxia was the difference in social status. In the United States, it was a gold standard world. Rich people were everything. If you paid high taxes, you would naturally have a reputation in the local area. After all, the salary of the police was the money you paid in taxes. You, as a taxpayer, were quite a dazzling existence. Even when you accumulated wealth to a certain extent. Those in the ruling party or the opposition parties would come to rope you in, hoping to get political donations. Therefore, in the United States, as long as you didn't evade taxes, you would be the guest of honor of all the politicians. No one would dare to do anything to you. Just like Jiang Hai, although his relationship with the upper echelons of the United States was still zero, in Winthrop, he was the local tyrant. Of course, the premise was that he paid all the taxes. In the United States, the most terrifying organization was not the FBI, CIA, etc., but the Tax Bureau. Countless tycoons were imprisoned. The biggest crime was tax evasion. Jiang Hai's identity was Huaxia, so he was particularly careful in this regard. The taxes he paid every year were calculated by 3 accountants hired by Moses Adams. Except for the jewelry he sold, all of his normal income had been declared for tax, even the 1 million yuan from selling the fish. However, even though Jiang Hai was doing well here, if he were in Huaxia, he would still have to tuck his tail between his legs. This was because Huaxia's social status was based on official status. No matter how much money you had, it was useless. This was because your land belonged to the country. If the country wanted to take it back, it could be taken back. If some officials took a fancy to it and said they wanted to take it back, they could still take it back. At most, they would give you some compensation. However, no one knew how much of this compensation would be left. Moreover, in Huaxia, being an official was the best way out. No matter how rich a businessman was, he could not withstand a single word from an official. The deputy section chief who destroyed a family and the deputy section chief who exterminated a family was not a joke. Of course, existences above the hall level were not allowed to appear here. Jiang Hai didn't want to be sealed for no reason. Therefore, in the book, the highest rank that appeared was the division level. However, it was still very easy for a division level official to deal with a billionaire. Well, just take it as easy. Anyway, Jiang Hai did not dare to return to China to develop. He was really afraid that when he woke up, his manner would become someone else's. This was the difference between the official status and the gold standard. The gold standard looked more red and cruel. It was like a pack of wolves. If you want to survive, you have to find food and eat other animals. When you become the strongest wolf in the pack, you will be the wolf king. The official status was like an official who was herding a flock of sheep. In his eyes, these sheep were treated equally. If he liked any of them, he would help them. However, they were still a flock of sheep. For the rich, the gold standard was much better than the official standard. At least they could ensure their own safety. However, for the ordinary people, the official standard was actually more conducive to governance. It was more stable, and there would be fewer conflicts in society. This was what it meant to not worry about scarcity, but about inequality. Well, Jiang Hai was a little off topic. However, now he was relieved because the biggest issue of the year was solved. Unknowingly, Qi Li had been with Jiang Hai for almost half a month. During this time, Jiang Hai and the others had been busy building the company, preparing the beef cattle to participate in the Texas All-American Beef Cattle Show, and dealing with the matters in the manner. Zheng Jin, who was recommended by Qi Li, was really good. She had learned a lot after being with Qi Li for so many years. Her fluent English made it easy for her to live here. In addition, with Jiang Hai's influence in Boston, at least Zhang Dihai and Moses Adams would definitely take care of her. Under such circumstances, Zheng Jin's efficiency was really high. It was as if the things in China didn't affect her. She set up the company, renovated the company, bought tables and chairs, met the employees, and so on. It could be said that Zheng Jin easily arranged these tasks in an orderly manner. After watching her for a week, he found that she was really good at this. Jiang Hai signed a contract with her. Jiang Hai hired her to be the CEO of the Tinglong company. There were only two main categories of work: publicity and transportation. Publicity of the beef and seafood produced in Jiang Hai's Tinglong manor. Transportation was responsible for passing these things through security and transporting them back to the capital of Huaxia, to be handed over to Qili. She could also send them to the big cities in the United States, where there would naturally be people from the Shanghai supermarkets to receive them. She mainly paid for things like planes, flight routes, and maintenance. She handled these quite well. As for her salary, Jiang Hai gave her $1 million a year. Although it wasn't particularly much, one could become a general manager in some domestic companies. $1 million a year was actually just a basic figure. After all, it was only $6 million, and they had to pay taxes. But what was really valuable was the 10% dividend and the company's shares. Jiang Hai owned 100% of the company's shares, but she could enjoy 10% of the dividend. This was also her goal. According to her estimation, if the company did well, it was impossible for it to lose money. After all, most of the business had already been contracted out. So even if it didn't make money in a year, it would at least make a net profit of $30 to $40 million. 10% was $3 to $4 million. This was not a small sum for Zheng Jin. Whether it was for money or for Qili, she was quite serious about her work. Except for an accountant, Jiang Hai was too lazy to take care of everything else. In Jiang Hai's eyes, she was a complete professional. After handing over the company to Zheng Jin, Jiang Hai and the others put more effort into the manor. This half a month might be the happiest half a month for Qili since her father passed away. Because Jiang Hai would hug her to sleep every night. Although he would leave for a while at night, when she fell asleep, Jiang Hai was by her side. When she woke up, Jiang Hai was also by her side. Without the pressure of work, she played with Jiang Hai in the manor every day. They would go to see the cows, ride horses, plant vegetables in the greenhouse that had been built with Delina and the others, or go to the vineyard to talk to Aphrodite and the others about the ripening of the grapes. Then, they would drink a glass of wine under the grapevines. If she was tired of playing on land, she could play in the sea. She could go fishing, catch fish, dive and catch lobsters. She could also ask Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunchen, who were almost mute here, to go shopping in Winthrop. To be honest, Qili really didn't want to leave anymore. She wanted to buy some native products or check out the seasonal clothes, but a phone call pulled her out of this idea. She could stay here, but she couldn't watch her father's company collapse or fall into the hands of others. This was the last thing she wanted to see. Because of this, after Qili accompanied Jiang Hai to pay his taxes, it was almost time for her to leave. But this time, Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunchen wouldn't leave. This time, they were already mentally prepared to stay by Jiang Hai's side. If Qi Jia and Qi Ye came back, then there would be 7 people in Jiang Hai's villa. It seemed to be getting more and more lively. Recently, they had been learning English from Delina and Marion. Seeing their changes, Jiang Hai was also very happy. Time sometimes passed by unknowingly. In the blink of an eye, Qili had been in Jiang Hai's villa for 3 weeks. And today, she was officially leaving. But when she came, there were 4 people, but when she left, she was the only one left. Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunchen decided to stay in Jiang Hai's villa. They didn't want to go back, but at least they didn't want to leave now. Zheng Jin had become Jiang Hai's CEO and signed a 1-year work contract. The visa was also easily completed with the help of Jiang Hai. So this time, she didn't want to leave. Qili also didn't want her to leave. After all, it was very troublesome to stay in China. You have to take care of yourself. Outside the departure hall of New York's Guwahati Airport, Jiang Hai and Qi Li stood opposite each other. Looking at Jiang Hai in front of her, Qi Li said with some worry. She didn't know when her heart had been completely tied to Jiang Hai. Looking at Qi Li, Jiang Hai hesitated for a moment before saying, "You too, if you feel anything wrong, contact me immediately. I can go back to China or pick you up. Don't forget, I am still your husband." Looking at Qi Li, Jiang Hai hesitated for a moment before saying, "Heh, you still know that you are my husband, but unfortunately, my husband is a womanizer. I think you have eaten almost all of the women in your manor. In the beginning, you lied to me that you didn't have that kind of feeling for Aphrodite and the others. A rabbit doesn't eat the grass near its burrow. I think you have eaten all of them now." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, although Qi Li's face showed a trace of displeasure, her heart was already blooming with joy. Husband, these two words, from Jiang Hai's mouth, it was really not an easy thing. But she still had to accept it and say what she should say. She didn't know how she could tolerate Jiang Hai having so many women. Maybe it was to make up for it, or for something else, but Qi Li found that she really didn't care about these things. Compared to those women, she was more concerned about whether she could stay by Jiang Hai's side. This was more important. I'm leaving. Don't miss me too much." Seeing that the plane had begun to check in, Qi Li knew that she had to leave. She glanced at Jiang Hai, took a deep breath, and then hugged Jiang Hai tightly. After kissing Jiang Hai's lips, she said in his ear. Then she picked up her luggage and left quickly. She didn't look back because she didn't know if she would be willing to leave if she looked back at Jiang Hai. Her life here with Jiang Hai and the people here with Jiang Hai were constantly destroying her strong woman side. She didn't know if she would have the ability to go back to the capital and be her own iron-blooded president after one look back. But in Qi Li's heart, a seed had been planted. It seemed that it was time for her to consider retirement. Once she found a trustworthy person and handed the company over to him, she would be able to look for Jiang Hai. This was a good thing. As he watched Qi Li's figure enter the airport, Jiang Hai's heart felt a little empty. In fact, even though Jiang Hai was living a good life here, he was actually a little lonely. He didn't lack friends. Everyone in Winthrop was his friend, but when these friends were linked to benefits, friendship was no longer as pure. Of course, this was only because Jiang Hai was busy. Jiang Hai didn't lack women either. Just like Qi Li said, Aphrodite and the others were indeed related to Jiang Hai. But their relationship was more of a superior and subordinate relationship, not like an equal boyfriend and girlfriend relationship. Ai Xiaoxi couldn't give him this, Feng Yunshan couldn't give him this, Pra Walton couldn't give him this, and even Qi Jia and Chia couldn't give him the same feeling as Qi Li. Qi Li was Qi Li, Qi Jia was Qi Jia, Chia was Chia, and Ai Xiaoxi was Ai Xiaoxi. Every woman by Jiang Hai's side was unique and irreplaceable. If anyone left, he would feel a little empty in his heart. I'm still not strong enough. Sooner or later, I'll have all my women by my side. Since I have the ability, if I don't start a harem, won't my efforts be in vain? With a self-deprecating smile, Jiang Hai, who had always thought of himself as a salted fish with no dreams, had his first dream sprouted because of Qi Li. It could also be said that it was an ambition. Although this ambition was not serious, it was more or less considered a main line. After sorting out his emotions, Jiang Hai drove back to the manor. The next day, he had to go to Boston. After Qi Li left, Qi Jia and Chia would be coming back. They had already settled the matters in Miami. The huge White Research Institute had been sold by Qi Jia. Anyway, Chia's illness had been completely cured, and they would officially return tomorrow. However, Jiang Hai couldn't stay with them for too long because he had to leave soon. This time, his target was Texas. Chapter 684. Sir. The plane will land in half an hour. Please hurry up. In a dual-use plane, a pretty stewardess stood outside the bathroom door with a blushing face. She knocked on the door while speaking to the person inside. Perhaps the stewardess heard her voice. After a few minutes, the bathroom door opened. Jiang Hai walked out of the room with Cheryl Lee, who could no longer stand on her own. Under the shy gaze of the stewardess, he walked back to his seat and put Cheryl next to him. After fastening her seatbelt, Cheryl leaned on Jiang Hai's shoulder as usual. She allowed Jiang Hai's hand to reach into her clothes and change certain parts of her body into various shapes. "Hey, we're still on the plane. Can you be more careful?" Looking at Jiang Hai and Cheryl Lee sitting next to her, Walton put down the fashion magazine in her hand and said impatiently, "It's really interesting in the sky. I haven't tried it before. Shall we try it too?" Hearing Walton's words, Jiang Hai smiled, stretched out his long arm, and pulled Walton into his arms. His hand had unknowingly touched her lower abdomen and reached into her clothes. After struggling for a while, she realized that she couldn't break free. Walton gave up and let Jiang Hai's big hand reach into her pants. Feeling that her clothes were completely wet, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. However, Walton didn't feel embarrassed at all. Instead, she continued to read the magazine. "I won't go with you. If you want to go, let's talk about it after we get off the plane." Ignoring Jiang Hai's gaze and actions, Walton said with a serious face. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. This woman is really cute. Sister Walton has been afraid of heights since the past. She is also afraid of flying. I've known her for so many years, and she never unfastens her seatbelt on the plane. Listening to Walton's words, Cheryl Lee whispered in Jiang Hai's ear. Playing in the air was actually proposed by her because they watched a movie about stewardesses in Jiang Hai's house a while ago. She felt that it might be good to play in the air, so she tried it today. Unexpectedly, in that narrow bathroom, there was indeed an indescribable feeling. There was no way to stretch out their body, and they couldn't even take off their clothes. They could only pull their underwear to the side, but it was a different feeling. Of course, the premise was that there was no one else on the plane. They took off from Boston to San Antonio. In just a few hours, they went to the bathroom 3 times, which showed how addicted they were. Walton had been sitting there reading a magazine. But looking at the magazine that she hadn't finished for a few hours, one could tell that her heart wasn't that calm. Glancing at Jiang Hai and Cheryl, Walton wrinkled her nose at them. When they landed on the ground, she will definitely let Jiang Hai, maybe let Jiang Hai know why the flowers are so red. After all, Jiang Hai is indeed talented in that aspect. However, it's not a problem to let Cheryl know the consequences of offending her. As the 3 of them chatted, laughed, and hugged each other, the plane was about to land at San Antonio's airport. Today was April 3rd. There were still 3 days before the Texas All-American Beef Show, but the venue was already set up. After getting the exact information, Walton used the plane dedicated to Sam's Club to take Jiang Hai and his cattle to Texas. This plane was a huge plane, an Airbus A380. The whole plane was changed into 2 parts, the cargo cabin and the cabin. There were only 10 seats in the cabin, and all of them were better than the first-class seats. The seats could be adjusted 180 degrees and could be used as a bed directly. Moreover, it was very wide, and the seats could be moved left and right. In addition to the decoration here, it was very luxurious. To be honest, Jiang Hai had some thoughts of buying such a plane. If he took such a plane back to China, it would be very comfortable. But the premise was that the money he spent was also very comfortable. Although the cargo cabin at the back was called a cargo cabin, it was actually not bad. At least the seats were comparable to those in the first-class cabin. This time, Jiang Hai came to participate in the competition to make a name for himself, not to open up a market. Therefore, he learned a lesson from last time and only brought 3 cows this time. However, these 3 cows were all carefully raised by him this month. These 3 cows were all leftover from last year. They were fat and strong, and full of spirituality. Of course, this so-called spirituality was not related to intelligence. It's just that these cows look very smart, that's all. As for the 3 cows, Jiang Hai also brought 3 cowboys with him. They were Robbins Garcia, Burke Dollar, and Bell Lester. Originally, Philemon Turner should have come, but considering Jiang Hai's safety outside, he specially sent Bell Lester this time. Of course, there was also a professional bodyguard, Knerson Peters. Athena Vesborio did not come, because the manor still needed to be protected. At this time, the 4 big men were sitting in the cargo cabin. As for the passenger cabin, only Jiang Hai and the other 2 were there. Naturally, Jiang Hai could do whatever he wanted, and these 2 would cooperate with him very well. As the tires came into contact with the ground, the huge plane couldn't help but shake. Robbins Garcia and the rest who were already prepared waited for the plane to slowly stabilize before they immediately walked into the cow enclosure to calm the cows who were a little panicked due to the tremors. The good thing about cows was that they were very quick to calm down. Soon, the 3 cows calmed down. Jiang Hai and the others also got off the plane. The airport had already prepared a car for the cows, which was parked behind the plane. Jiang Hai and the others also got off the plane. After helping to put the cows into the car, they left the airport through the cargo passage. Jiang Hai and the others also left in the car prepared by Prawalton. Their goal was the venue this time. Although they could stay in a better hotel, don't forget that Jiang Hai had to stay with the cows. Prawalton and Cheryl had to stay with Jiang Hai. If they came to San Antonio, they would have a chance to be alone with Jiang Hai. If they went to another hotel to stay, it would be a waste, especially since Prawalton had tortured her along the way. When they arrived at the venue, Jiang Hai and the others showed their registration information. Then the people here arranged a place for them to graze the cows and an exhibition hall. After that, Jiang Hai and the others went to a hotel prepared by the organizers. Although it was only a 4-star hotel, it was still very good. Jiang Hai spent a lot of money, so the location of his exhibition hall was good. The room he stayed in was also a suite. After entering the room with Prawalton and Cheryl, Prawalton pushed Jiang Hai onto the bed. It was obvious what they wanted to do. It was afternoon when they arrived, but when Jiang Hai and the others came out, it was already night. According to Jiang Hai, they were going to find something to eat, but Robbins Garcia and the others were unwilling to leave. After all, the exhibition was coming soon. The cows were also very important, so only 4 people went out in the end. Jiang Hai, Prawalton, Cheryl Lee, and Jiang Hai's bodyguard, Knerson Peters. It was easy for the 4 of them to go out. Jiang Hai rented an SUV and drove to the distant holy city, San Antonio. In fact, for people in China, there had always been a misunderstanding about San Antonio. It was mainly for the NBA. This was because people in the NBA always said that San Antonio was a small city. The basketball market was small, and there was no economy. In the eyes of people in China, San Antonio might not be as big as Boston, Atlanta, or Oakland. But in fact, this was all nonsense. San Antonio was a big city in the United States. It was quite a big city. Texas was the largest state in the United States besides Alaska. The largest city in Texas, Houston, was the 4th largest city in the United States. As for the holy city, San Antonio, it was the 2nd largest city in Texas and the 7th largest city in the United States. Other than New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, and Houston, San Antonio was actually not afraid of anyone. Philadelphia, the 6th largest city, and Phoenix, the 5th largest city, were actually on par with San Antonio. Boston? If it was a metropolitan area, then San Antonio was far behind. However, they were talking about cities, and they were using cities as a unit. Boston's urban area alone was not comparable at all. San Antonio's history could be said to be very long. It was the earliest Native American settlement in the United States. In 1691, Spanish explorers settled here. In the middle of the 18th century, it developed into the largest Native American settlement in Texas. In the middle of the 19th century, Texas and Mexico fought, including the Battle of the Alamo. At that time, the fight was very tragic. Mexico was very strong at that time. Texas was defeated, but later the Americans stood up. After Wu took over the territory of Texas, the Mexican-American War started. The United States annexed Texas, and then there was the Civil War. This place became a famous cattle trading center and border city in the United States. To be honest, this city had a long history, but there were not many places that attracted people. There were only two reasons. One was the architecture of the Japanese people. After all, it was occupied by the Spanish in the beginning, so a large number of Spanish-style buildings were preserved. Later, it was occupied by Mexico, and many Mexican buildings were preserved here. There were very few American buildings here. However, there were many such exotic buildings. Second, the Holy River, which the people of San Antonio were proud of. The banks of the river were green and could be said to be world famous. Around the river, there were restaurants, hotels, cafes, tourist souvenir shops, theaters, museums, and other buildings. However, all the buildings mentioned above were located in the river valley, which was lower than the city street level. In other words, looking from the city, one could only see the river valley full of trees, but there were no traces of people. It was quite spectacular, and it gave people a strange feeling when they walked in. Besides these two things, there was nothing else to see. Second, the recruitment mainly depended on the humanities. The Texas Folk Festival, beef show, rodeo competition, and so on. Every year, the San Antonio Livestock Show and rodeo competition were held here, but it was in February and lasted for 3 consecutive weeks. In February, Jiang Hai was at home, so naturally, he could not come. This time, Jiang Hai participated in the livestock show held in Texas. Compared to the one held in San Antonio, the one in Texas was more popular. It was open to the whole country and lasted for a week. There were 2 kinds of competitions, the cattle competition and the rodeo competition. Both competitions started on the first day, then went through 3 days of auditions. On the 4th day, the top 16 were decided. On the 5th day, the top 8 were decided. On the 6th day, the top 4 were decided. On the 7th day, the best cattle and the best rodeo were decided. Compared to the voting in New York, a team of experts was formed here. They went into the exhibition hall to look at the cattle and score them. Therefore, there was no need to set up a TV and hang ribbons like in New York. It was very troublesome. Jiang Hai and the others came here mainly to get cattle. They did not care too much about rodeo. Robbins Garcia and Burke Dollar came here to compete when they were young. They had won honors, so they could not participate again. As for Bell Lester, it was not that the 2 old guys wanted to criticize him, but with his current ability, it was impossible for him to pass the auditions in such a competition. One was from Texas, and the other was from Montana. The rodeos in these 2 places relied on these things to make a living. Therefore, when it came to picking up sheep, riding cattle, training horses, and so on, Bell Lester was at least 10 times better. Therefore, from the beginning, Jiang Hai's goal was the beef show, not the rodeo competition. Of course, it was still a bit early to say this. After all, they had to wait 3 days. Jiang Hai, Pra Walton, Cheryl Lee, and Knerson Peters went straight into the city of San Antonio. Chapter 685. Hi, boss. Give us 4 steaks. Hurry up. The game is about to start. We still have to drive there. The 4 people who walked in were probably 4 fans. They didn't look very old. They were about 30 years old. They were wearing the Spurs black jerseys. They shouted loudly as they walked in. Jiang Hai looked at them when he heard their shouts. The 4 of them walked to a table and began to discuss tonight's match. Is there a Spurs game tonight? Jiang Hai didn't pay much attention to NBA games. Although he would watch it sometimes, most of the time, he preferred to watch American TV series and variety shows. For example, there was a famous American TV series called Slave of Desire and another one called Spartacus. They were all very good American TV series. There were no scenes that went against the socialist ideology. They were American TV series that anyone, from 99 years old to people who had just learned how to walk, could watch. Moreover, they were filmed quite well. However, he used to like basketball, so when he saw these people talking about the Spurs, Jiang Hai's interest was piqued. Of course, boss. Tonight is the regular season game between the Spurs and the Raptors. San Antonio will win. A white man turned his head and looked at Jiang Hai. He might have heard Jiang Hai's words. After hearing his words, many people in the restaurant started shouting. It could be seen that the Spurs had an unusually high reputation in the local area. Actually, this was understandable. Ever since the Spurs were established, they had won a total of 5 championships. Especially after 1998, they had never disappointed anyone. After choosing Duncan, they won the championship in 1999. In 2003, they defeated the Lakers, who were at their peak, and won the championship. In 2005, they defeated the Pistons, who had just eliminated the Lakers' F4 powerhouse, and in 2007, they defeated LeBron James, who was at his peak. After that, they entered the playoffs every year, and slowly changed. In 2013 and 2014, they entered the finals in a row, and with a bunch of old arms and legs, they defeated the Big Three Miami Heat. At the same time, they were now one of the top teams in the league. When Jiang Hai first started watching basketball, it was because of Yao Ming of the Rockets. Later, his favorite team was the Phoenix Suns. The way the Suns played was very popular. However, during the 2 years when the Suns were at their peak, they were defeated by the Spurs. At that time, Jiang Hai didn't like the Spurs. He felt that the Spurs were a boring team. After pinning the other team to the ground, they didn't let the other team fight back. It was very difficult for him to like the Spurs. However, in recent years, Jiang Hai had become a fan of the Spurs. That smooth attack, that valiant fighting style, was indeed very likable, and so was Jiang Hai. Usually, he would just watch the Spurs play at home. Now that he was in San Antonio, he wanted to go and watch the game live. Therefore, he looked at Walton and Cheryl Lee. He wanted to ask for their opinions. Although I don't know much, if you want to go, we'll go. After looking at each other, Cheryl's gaze landed on Walton. Her meaning was to let Walton do as she pleased. Walton thought for a while. Indeed, other than going back to roll in the sheets, she didn't have any other activities at night. She had just done it in the afternoon and was still in a happy state. If Jiang Hai wanted to go and watch, then she would accompany him. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but cheer softly. Then, he took out his phone and prepared to buy tickets. The Spurs had a lot of fans, and they were all die-hard fans. The team's results were good and they entered the playoffs every year. Therefore, the loss of fans was relatively small. In addition, the team's playing style had become more and more beautiful in recent years, so the number of fans had increased. However, the football market here wasn't particularly popular. Other than key games and the playoffs, it was difficult to fill the seats with fans. Basically, it wasn't too difficult to buy tickets at any time. It was just a matter of location. Jiang Hai wanted to buy tickets in the front row, so he naturally didn't choose to sit too far behind. Therefore, he chose to sit in the first row, not far behind the Spurs bench. Naturally, the tickets weren't cheap at such a close position. The Spurs' results were there for all to see. His tickets couldn't be as cheap as those of the Bucks. After buying 4 tickets next to each other, Jiang Hai and the others sped up their eating. After eating, they prepared to leave directly. However, just as they were about to leave the shop, a group of people walked in from outside. Compared to the group of fans just now, these people were obviously the so-called successful people. They were all wearing suits and ties. The person in front kept smiling as he led the way. As he walked, he introduced the riverside. Originally, the two sides didn't know each other, so it was fine if they just walked past each other. However, the problem was that the entrance of the shop wasn't very big. The large group of people didn't seem to have any intention of lining up. They just squeezed their way in. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai, who was originally very anxious, couldn't help but frown. However, he didn't say anything. After all, this wasn't Winthrop. It wasn't his territory. For a small matter like this, it would be fine if he just let it pass. It would show that he was a person of high standards. However, if things were to pass so easily, there wouldn't be a need to describe it in detail. Among the crowd, most people's eyes were originally focused on this shop, but some people's eyes were looking at something else. For example, Cheryl Lee and Pra Walton beside Jiang Hai. Ordinary men naturally have evil intentions but don't have the guts to do it. After all, they have male companions beside them. However, some people didn't care about this. So a well-dressed white man who looked about 30 years old came over with a smile. He wanted to walk in front of Pra Walton, but Jiang Hai wouldn't give him such a chance. He directly blocked in front of Pra Walton and Cheryl Lee. The man couldn't help but frown. However, he still didn't stop. He glanced at Jiang Hai's physique and smiled disdainfully. He was about to push Jiang Hai away. But the moment their shoulders collided, the man's face couldn't help but change. He really didn't expect Jiang Hai's strength to be so strong. Under this collision, he felt a sharp pain in his shoulder, and then his body unconsciously turned back. "Why did you bump into me?" This man really knows how to complain first. After being pushed away, he instantly covered his shoulder and looked at Jiang Hai angrily and shouted loudly. Hearing his words, the people who originally walked in were stunned for a moment, then walked to the man's side. Seeing the crowd gathering, Jiang Hai chuckled. "Want to fight?" He wasn't afraid of anyone when he fought. However, just as Jiang Hai was about to warm up, Connerson Peters stood up and came in front of them. "Step back, don't come close." At the sight of Connerson's powerful figure, those people who had gathered around were all startled. After exchanging glances with each other, they all took a step back. Actually, their relationship was not as solid as they had imagined. They just needed to support each other. However, there was no need for them to confront this burly man head-on. Given his size, it was obviously not a good idea to find trouble with him. "Hey, you're not allowed to make trouble here. Otherwise, I'll call the police." At this time, the owner of this restaurant, or rather, the waiter, also came over, but he didn't mean to stir up trouble. Generally, when there was a conflict in China, the owner would come out to stop the fight and say something like, "We're all here to have fun. You don't have to do this." Or, "Give me some face, don't start a conflict here." Everyone put out the fire, but the American owner was arrogant. If he didn't agree with a word, he would call the police. He wasn't afraid that these people would really fight. Hearing this person's words, the people here pretended to be angry and then completely retreated. What a joke. They didn't intend to fight. What a joke. If they were injured, it would be too much of a loss. And although the man didn't seem to be dressed well, he was obviously someone who didn't lack money since he could go out with a bodyguard. "What's the matter?" "Jiang Hai, why are you here?" Seeing that the crowd had retreated, a person who came in first ran into the circle, wanting to be a peacemaker. But when he just walked in and saw Jiang Hai in front of him, he couldn't help but be stunned. When Jiang Hai saw him, he was also a little surprised, because he knew this person, Rosalind Cartwright, one of Jiang Hai's competitors last year. He came from the Cartwright Animal Husbandry Company. In the beginning, a man named Paul K. went to Jiang Hai's manor to pull cattle, and there was some hatred between the two sides. Later, at the beef show in New York State, this guy made a bet with Jiang Hai. As a result, he was beaten black and blue by Jiang Hai. If it was normal times, Jiang Hai probably wouldn't remember him, but it was different here. Jiang Hai just said that he was going to attend the beef show and just remembered him. He didn't expect to meet him here. It was really fate. Why are you here? Has your position been restored? Looking at Rosalind Carlett, who was walking in front of him, Jiang Hai crossed his arms and said disdainfully. He clearly remembered that after this guy lost to him last year, he was directly fired by his family's company. Now it seems that he is worthy of being his son. In just a year, he has been restored to his position. Ahem, you don't need to worry about that. What? The New York Beef Show can't satisfy you anymore, so now you're eyeing the National Beef Show? Let me tell you, the National Beef Show is not as easy as the New York Beef Show. There are more strong people here than you think. Hearing Jiang Hai mention last year's incident, Rosalind Cartwright's face couldn't help but change, and he said gloomily. He thought about it and figured out the purpose of Jiang Hai's coming here. It was nothing more than the same as his, to attend the National Beef Show. Thinking of this, his gloomy face became even gloomier. Originally, the Cartwright Company's business didn't cover the territory outside the northeast corner of the United States, so they didn't care about the National Beef Show. First, they couldn't beat it. Second, it was because the beef that they carefully prepared might not be able to cover the market after the competition. At that time, it would be a waste. In addition, the competition here was too fierce. Therefore, in their opinion, it was better to take over the New York Beef Show than to waste time on the National Beef Show in Texas. But who would have thought that Jiang Hai would come out last year and completely ruin their wishful thinking? The reason why he didn't attend the New York Beef Show this year, but came to Texas to attend the livestock show in Texas, was to avoid meeting Jiang Hai again. But he didn't expect to meet Jiang Hai here. Needless to say, he knew what he was here for. It must be for the National Beef Show. Thinking of Jiang Hai's beef, he couldn't help but have a headache. This time, it might be really troublesome. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai shrugged. He was quite confident in his beef. I hope you can get a good result. Let's go. Glancing at Jiang Hai's indifferent look, Rosalind Cartwright took a deep breath and left with the others. Seeing them leave, Jiang Hai and the others also left. They still had to watch the competition. Do you know this group of people? That girl seems pretty good. After Jiang Hai and the others left, the person who had the conflict just now couldn't help but walk over, covering his shoulder. He looked at Rosalind Cartwright and said, "Don't give up. Just give up." That guy. Well, it's nothing. That guy raises cattle in Boston, Massachusetts. He's a small manor owner. The quality of the beef he raises is pretty good. He's probably here to participate in this event. After hearing this person's words, Rosalind wanted to tell him to give up. Jiang Hai was very powerful in Massachusetts, and he had a lot of personal property. If something happened to him, he would be finished. But when he was about to say it, he suddenly changed his mind. If this guy wants to find trouble with Jiang Hai, then let him go. If he succeeds, then Jiang Hai's trip will be in vain. If he can't find her, then Jiang Hai will deal with him. It has nothing to do with him, and he will have one less competitor. Why not? Hearing Rosalind Cartwright's words, the man couldn't help but touch his chin. This guy was a pervert. When he saw Prawalton, it was impossible for him not to be tempted. Although she was taken, he could use her to loosen the soil. As for Jiang Hai, he didn't care at all. He was just a manor owner. How much money could he have? What power could he have? Just give him some channels, and he would be happy. Thinking of this guy was even more certain that he wanted that beauty. Chapter 686. Do you have a grudge against the Cartwright Company? Prawalton, who was lying on Jiang Hai's chest, forced herself to calm down. She asked Jiang Hai with her eyes half closed. Jiang Hai hugged her with one hand and Cheryl Lee with the other. He took 2 deep breaths to stabilize his unstable breathing. Then, he began to recall. Let's talk about this. Cartwright, the Cartwright Company is a big company in the Cartwright Company. Back then, my cowboys wanted to sell their cattle to this company. Actually, you can't blame them because they didn't know how much my cattle were worth. The people sent by this company were very arrogant. At that time, I made a bet with them to see if I could get first place in the New York State Livestock Exhibition. You know the result. Because of this bet, the company lost a lot of money. So, we have a grudge. Jiang Hai smiled as he looked at Prawalton. Oh, is that so? This is a normal competition. Don't worry about them. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Prawalton closed her eyes and found a comfortable position on Jiang Hai's shoulder like a kitten. Then, she leaned against him and got ready to sleep. Jiang Hai also got ready to sleep with them in his arms. After leaving the restaurant, Jiang Hai didn't know what those people said. He went to the Spurs' home stadium and watched the Spurs games. He had to admit that the current Spurs were indeed one of the strongest teams in the league. Even the Fierce Dragons, one of the top 3 teams in the Eastern Conference, were beaten by them. However, looking at the current Spurs, Jiang Hai still felt that there was a problem. That was because the Spurs lacked a true offensive all-star in their current lineup. In other words, no matter how tight the opponent's defense was, he could still score. In the past, Duncan was such a person. No matter who was guarding against him, there was no way to deal with him. However, things were different now. Aldridge's offense as the core of the two Dirks was not very stable. His shooting ability was still quite good against the short players inside the three-point line, but against those muscle-bound players, his offensive ability was indeed a little weak. He was not bad at playing the 4th position, but he was still a little lacking at the 5th position. Small forward Kyohei Leonard's defense was one of the best in the league, but his offense, especially when it came to attacking with the ball, was still far from good. His hit rate for a back solo was also not particularly high, and there was still room for improvement. From Jiang Hai's perspective as a fake fan, the Spurs were a strong team. However, they were not at the level of a champion. However, this had nothing to do with Jiang Hai. After watching the game, they returned to the hotel. Of course, after returning, Connors and Peters went to eat some supper before returning to rest together. After returning to the room, Jiang Hai, Prawalton, and Cheryl Lee naturally had another meal. Fortunately, Jiang Hai was not an ordinary person. If he was, he would have been done for a long time. Sometimes, Jiang Hai thought that monogamy was not only a matter of women's rights, but also to protect men and let them live a little longer. Hugging Prawalton and Cheryl Lee, Jiang Hai slowly fell asleep. The hotel was originally built in the suburbs, and it was a 4-star hotel. The soundproofing was very good. There was no other sound throughout the night, and Jiang Hai and the others had a good night's sleep. The next morning, they came out of the room at 9 o'clock. After washing up, they went to the hotel lobby to have breakfast. Breakfast here was included in the accommodation. Although the organizers provided accommodation, they did not provide lunch, dinner, or supper. Only breakfast was eaten as a buffet. In fact, it was called a buffet, but there was a lot of food. There were sandwiches, baked bread, and a lot of other ingredients. You could take whatever you wanted. There was fresh milk, fried eggs, sausages, ham, bacon, and fresh lettuce, kale, and other vegetables. In addition to Western food, there were also Chinese food, such as various kinds of rice porridge, soy milk, Mexican burritos, and so on. It could be said that this hotel prepared breakfast for people all over the world. As long as you wanted to eat, there was food here. Among Jiang Hai's group of 6, Robbins Garcia got up very early and went straight to the cowshed. After all, there wasn't much time left until the start of the competition. Therefore, the cowshed couldn't be left unguarded. In case someone was up to no good, or if there was an accident, they wouldn't have enough time to transfer more beef cattle from the manor. Therefore, there must be someone guarding the cowshed, even at night. Last night, it was Burke Dollar for the first half of the night, and Bell Lester for the second half. This morning, Robbins Garcia went to replace him. Therefore, when Jiang Hai and the others arrived at the restaurant, they found that there were a lot of people eating breakfast. Most of them were dressed in standard cowboy attire. At the same time, there were also some who wore suits and ties. These were the representatives or bosses of the livestock companies. Looking at these people, Jiang Hai didn't care about them. He found an empty seat and let Pra Walton and Cheryl Lee occupy it. Then Jiang Hai and the others went to get food. However, when he just came back with food, the scene in front of him made Jiang Hai laugh. It's really melodramatic. Looking at his table in the distance, Jiang Hai lowered his head and smiled. Boss, do you need me to send them away? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Knerson Peters also noticed the distance. He walked to Jiang Hai's side and whispered to Jiang Hai. Looking at the fierce light in his eyes, Jiang Hai waved his hand and stopped him. Let's take a look first. After Jiang Hai finished speaking, he walked back to his table with the food, but at this time, there was a guy sitting next to Pra Walton. Jiang Hai also saw this guy last night. It was the guy who bumped into him. At this time, this man was sitting next to Pra Walton, talking about something, but Pra Walton's face was still cold. Except for Jiang Hai, she has always had this expression towards other men, but this person didn't seem to care. Hey, you are sitting in the wrong place. Putting the food on the table, Jiang Hai pointed to the man's position and said with narrowed eyes. But the man just glanced at Jiang Hai, then turned his head and continued to talk nonsense. For example, he has a manor in Montana, how beautiful it is. He has a villa in California, next to the sea. He also has a yacht, he can sail Pra Walton and so on. Listening to him talking nonsense, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh. Oh, sorry, it seems that this gentleman is deaf, let's go somewhere else. Jiang Hai looked at the man, shrugged, picked up the food and winked at Pra Walton. Everyone was about to leave. Seeing that the beauty in front of him was about to leave, the man had no choice but to ignore Jiang Hai. He turned around and looked at Jiang Hai arrogantly. Are you blind? Can't you see that I am chatting with this lady? If you are blind, I suggest you go to the ophthalmology department. Don't do these disgusting things. Looking at Jiang Hai, the man turned his butt and said slowly. Oh. This gentleman doesn't seem to be deaf, then it seems that there is something wrong with your brain. Didn't you hear me say that there is someone here? Staring at the person in front of him, Jiang Hai also smiled. He looked at him with disdain and said. This guy really thinks he's something. Is this seat yours? Do you think there is someone here just because you say so? I also said that this place is mine. Boy, you better watch your mouth. A nouveau riche from Boston dares to pretend in our Texas. Believe it or not, you won't be able to walk out of Texas in one piece. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the man smiled disdainfully, then looked at Jiang Hai with an arrogant face. I said, the place I hate the most is Texas. There are too many dogs here, and they don't understand human language. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai was not angry, but looked at Pra Walton, waved at her, and then said with a smile. Now that the dog is barking at you, what are you going to do? Hearing what Jiang Hai said, Pra Walton couldn't help but pick up a piece of bread with a smile, tore off a piece and put it in her mouth and chewed gently, while chuckling at Jiang Hai. You dare to call me a dog? Listening to Jiang Hai and Pra Walton echoing each other, the man's eyes widened and he said with an angry face. Unfortunately, Jiang Hai and Pra Walton ignored him. I'm a dog lover. If a dog barks at me, I should kill it, but today I'm in a good mood, so I'm just going to drive it away. With his head lowered, Jiang Hai said softly, and when his voice fell, his hand also put on the man's shoulder. You want to? Feeling Jiang Hai's action, the man couldn't help but panic a little. He knew that Jiang Hai's physical fitness was not comparable to his, so he wanted to say something, but before he finished speaking, Jiang Hai's right arm instantly exerted force. He directly threw the man out, yes, threw him out. He flew directly from the chair, almost 2 meters high, and fell heavily on the carpet in the distance. Then Jiang Hai slowly sat down in front of him. My arm. My arm. My arm. You bastard. You bastard. "Ah, my arm, it hurts, you bastard, how dare you hit me, security, where are the security guards? If I get hit, there won't be anyone, you bastard, who the F***ck, eat." This fall, although it wouldn't hurt him, it was inevitable that it would hurt. When he landed, the man hit his body with his hand, which made his arm hurt, but he still had a lot of energy. After he stood up with his arm, he shouted loudly. Hearing his shout, many security guards in the distance rushed over. Looking at his appearance, plus Jiang Hai's appearance, it was not difficult to see that this should be a conflict between the guests. Originally, Jiang Hai was still thinking whether there would be some kind of melodramatic thing, but he didn't expect that the people in this hotel were quite neutral. After looking at the situation, they didn't come over to say anything melodramatic, nor did they stand up for this man. They just walked in front of this man and asked if he needed to call the police or an ambulance. Their meaning was obvious. They were not going to stand up for him and find trouble with Jiang Hai. Hearing the words of these security guards, the man's face turned purple. Jiang Hai and the others sat in the distance, but they couldn't help but laugh. This guy seems to be sick, and very sick. This disease is called the protagonist's disease. He always thinks that the world should revolve around him. As long as others are disrespectful to him, or have a trace of neutrality, he will jump out and say that he has suffered unfair treatment. Now, seeing that these security guards didn't stand up for him, he couldn't help but jump up and curse. But he only moved his mouth, he didn't dare to do anything, and if he called the police wouldn't care. Just the fact that he harassed the other party first, Walton could sue him, and it was uncertain who would win at that time. He had to admit that the United States had a strong sense of law. Even if he had called the police, nothing would have happened. This guy just said a few harsh words and left. Looking at his back, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh. There are really a lot of crazy dogs. Young man, you may have to be careful. At this time, after the people at the next table finished eating, a yellow man in his 40s walked to Jiang Hai's table and looked at Jiang Hai in a friendly manner. "Oh, hello, what should I be careful of?" Hearing this man's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but immediately reply, then asked him. "The person you just kicked out is called Roland Schalater, the heir of the SSR company. His family has a high status in the Texas livestock industry." After hearing Jiang Hai's words, the middle-aged man said to Jiang Hai, "At least he has to let Jiang Hai know who he offended." Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also looked at Walton in confusion. He has never heard of the SSR company. Texas Animal Husbandry Company. We have dealt with this company before. It is indeed one of the largest companies in Texas. The first S stands for State of Texas, and the last SR stands for stock farming. Its market value is estimated to be around $2 billion. Looking at Jiang Hai's eyes, Walton's brain flashed, and he already found the company's situation. Chapter 687. More than 2 billion? Hearing Walton's words, Jiang Hai touched his chin and smiled. Animal husbandry companies worth more than 2 billion yuan. In fact, on a global scale, it was definitely not a small company. This was talking about the market value, not the total value. If he wants to acquire it, the price will inevitably be higher, about 3 billion. In the world, there were only a few companies in animal husbandry that could reach millions of dollars. Among them, the well-deserved giant in the United States was the Cargill Group. Other than that, there was no existence that Jiang Hai couldn't move. A small company with a market value of more than 2 billion can't even compare to Jiang Hai. What can Jiang Hai be afraid of them? "Thank you very much, I will take care of his affairs." Since he is not afraid in his heart, he is in the medical team. Only by knowing the enemy and yourself can you win 100 battles. Jiang Hai is not a person who takes advantage of others. Since this person helped him, Jiang Hai still has to thank him. "You're welcome, I see your skin color. You are Asian, right?" Looking at Jiang Hai, the middle-aged man also smiled and said to him, "Well, yes, I am from Huaxia." Hearing this man's words, Jiang Hai answered the question. In fact, he was also a little curious. I feel like you are from Huaxia. My name is Lu Lekeng, and I am also from Huaxia. Now I run a ranch in Texas. This is my wife, Huaxia Lu, and this is my son, Lu Rongshuan. Hearing that Jiang Hai is also from Huaxia, the middle-aged man here couldn't help but smile. Then he introduced the two people behind him, a very typical white woman, about the same age as Lu Lekeng. There is also a mixed-race boy who looks to be in his teens. At this time, he is looking at Jiang Hai timidly. Hello, brother, did you settle down here? After greeting them, Jiang Hai couldn't help but look at Lu Lekeng. Yeah, it's not easy to make a living in China. I studied here when I was in university. After I graduated, I considered going back to China to work, but the working environment in China wasn't very good. So I took the 200,000 that my dad was going to give me to find a job and came to the place where I studied. I bought a piece of land and started working as a farmer. How should I put it? At least it's more comfortable than working in China. Listening to Jiang Hai's words, Lu Lekeng couldn't help but smile. But don't look at how happy he is. But Jiang Hai knew that 200,000 renminbi from 10 years ago was still worth a lot of money. At that time, he might not be able to buy a house in Beijing, but he could at least buy a good house in Bing City. He could even use 200,000 renminbi to invest overseas. He had to admit that Lu Lekeng was daring. Brother, you are really bold. Hearing this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but give him a thumbs up. Huh, it's not like what you said. Actually, the reason why I came here is because I studied here when I was in university, so I am not unfamiliar with this place. But little brother, are you also participating in the beef cattle exhibition? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Lu Lekeng couldn't help but smile. Although he didn't think that he was great, being able to gain recognition was a good feeling. Yes, I am also a farmer, but my home is in Winthrop. If you have time, you can come to my place to play. My place is near the sea. Listening to Lu Lekeng's words, Jiang Hai also said with a smile. Okay, when I have time. Hearing Jiang Hai's invitation, Lu Lekeng couldn't help but smile and said. In fact, these words were almost the same as not saying anything. In China, when I have time, I will wait for the next time, and I will wait for a while. These words were basically excuses. When I have time? When will I have time? Wait for the next time, when will the next time be? So when they say this, they are just being polite, but it is different in the United States, they will take it seriously. So after hearing the words of his father and Jiang Hai, Lu Lekeng didn't have any thoughts, but his wife and son's eyes lit up. To them, being able to go out and play was a very good thing. After saying goodbye to Lu Lekeng's family, Jiang Hai also went back to prepare. They were going to the cowshed to take a look. Although the cows were sent to the cowshed last night, Jiang Hai didn't look at the environment there carefully. Now that it is dawn, everyone can't sleep during the day, so naturally, they have to go and take a look. As for Frau Walton, she left first. Because she also has her own things to do. As the manager of Sam's Club, she not only has to give advice to Jiang Hai, but also her own business. She also had to think about her own store. Therefore, since she came to the National Beef Cattle Exhibition, not only did she have to help the Soaring Dragon Manor make a name for herself, but she also had to choose a channel to sell the meat. After all, Jiang Hai's manor only produced 10,000 cows a year. A cow weighs more than 400 kilograms of beef. That's more than 8 million pounds of beef. That's all. If it was distributed to the entire United States, it wouldn't even be enough for everyone in the United States to eat. Of course, this is just a saying. Jiang Hai's beef is not for ordinary people to eat. But for those rich people, 365 days a year wasn't enough. Therefore, Sam's Club still needed to purchase some other types of beef. Jiang Hai's Soaring Dragon Manor had high-end beef, but they also needed some mid-range beef. As for the low-end beef, they didn't need it. They could directly go to Walmart to buy it. Because of her work, she had to go to the local area to recruit her staff, and then come to Jiang Hai's place in the evening. Now Walton may have been holding back for too long, it is time for her to taste. She is extremely infatuated with Jiang Hai. Cheryl Lee is also quite infatuated with Jiang Hai, not to mention Walton. After separating from the two women, Jiang Hai also drove the car and took Knerson Peters to the cowshed. After all, there are only 3 cowboys this time, and they are divided into 3 shifts. In that case, the people will be exhausted, so Jiang Hai must come to replace them. When he arrived here, Robbins Garcia is standing in front of their 3 cows busy. Seeing Jiang Hai come over, he can't help but smile and wave, indicating his position. Jiang Hai walked over while looking at the nearby situation. He has to admit that this National Animal Husbandry exhibition is quite good. The cowshed was completely separated from each other. It should be that when the cowshed was built, they had already considered the number of cattle each family had. Some families came here to discuss business, so they had more cattle. Because of this, their location was more remote and occupied a larger area. Some came to win awards, such as Jiang Hai. Their cows are relatively small, but they are very good. The cowshed they occupy is relatively small, but the facilities are better. For example, the shed where Jiang Hai is at this time is about 3 meters high. The whole roof is made of colored steel, the ground is made of cement, and the surrounding is also made of reinforced concrete. It is windproof and breathable. There is also a special sewage channel, feed trough, and so on. It can be said that it has everything. There is even an air conditioner in the cowshed to prevent the temperature here from being too high. On the other side of the cowshed, there is a single lounge. People can rest here at night. Jiang Hai walked in and took a look. The lounge is not big, about 3 or 4 square meters. In addition to a single bed, there is only a table and a few chairs. But even so, it is quite good. At least there is a place to rest. When Jiang Hai came, Robbins Garcia was there brushing the cows. Cows are not like horses, so they don't need to be brushed all day. Horses will have problems if they are not brushed for a few days, but cows are not brushed under normal circumstances. Jiang Hai's manner is the same. However, these cows are here to participate in the competition. Brushing their hair will make them more beautiful. At least in terms of appearance, it will add some points. Looking at Jiang Hai walking around, Robbins Garcia can't help but smile and say, "Hey, boss, you're here." "Well, I'm here. The environment here is not bad. It's much better than the New York Beef Show." Hearing Robbins Garcia's words, Jiang Hai also said to him. To be honest, he quite likes the environment here. Yeah, after all, this is Texas, a paradise for cowboys. When I was young, I also came here to explore. I have to admit that with my skills, in Winthrop, Boston, or even Massachusetts, I really don't respect anyone except Burke. But here, my level is only slightly better than a beginner. Shaking his head, Robbins Garcia said with some emotion. Texas and Montana, a paradise for cowboys, is not a joke. Purely in terms of skills, the strength of the people in these 2 places is indeed terrifying. Even Robbins Garcia has to admit defeat. According to him, in Texas, there are at least 8,000 if not 10,000 cowboys of his level. They dare not show off here. However, Jiang Hai didn't intend to hire any cowboys here. This was because the cowboys in Texas were notorious for their bad tempers. Perhaps it was because they were located on the border, but their customs were quite tough. If the Russians were a fighting nation, then the Texans were also half a fighting nation. It is very common to fight over a disagreement here. They are very xenophobic and are unwilling to leave their hometown, even if their hometown is very poor. Under such circumstances, if Jiang Hai wants to recruit people, those with real skills will not come. Moreover, Jiang Hai was quite confident in Robbins Garcia. This skill was enough for him. Jiang Hai was more interested in him, not because of his cowboy skills, but because of his management ability, which was a rare ability. After visiting the cowshed here, Jiang Hai also stayed here and chatted with Robbins Garcia. At night, Jiang Hai has to deal with Walton and Cheryl. In addition, he is the boss. He will not come at night, but he is still willing to come and take a look during the day. If Robbins Garcia wants to sleep, he can go back to sleep. If he wants to walk around, he can also walk around. 4 people watching is better than 1 person here. Robbins Garcia also knows Jiang Hai's thoughts. Although he and Jiang Hai have an employer-employee relationship, the two of them have a good private relationship. Therefore, they had a lot of topics to talk about. While talking, Jiang Hai also talked about Du Feimin's manner. But after listening to Jiang Hai's words, Robbins Garcia frowned. In fact, using a helicopter to herd cattle is not good news. Because the sound of the helicopter is too loud, the cattle will be frightened after hearing it. Even if they are used to it, the noise will have some effect on them. They won't get fat. Without fat, there will be no marble veins. Just relying on our grass. Looking at Jiang Hai, Robbins Garcia said with some worry. Hearing what he said, Jiang Hai was also stunned. He only saw the spectacular scene there, but he really didn't think about this problem. The helicopter is indeed very loud. He felt a little uncomfortable listening to it, let alone those cows. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai can't help but want to call Du Feimin. His first boat of grass has been transported. If the helicopter doesn't produce marble-veined beef, then Jiang Hai will lose more than he gains. It's better to call and inform him. TCH, you really don't know how to pretend to know. Chapter 688. What can you do if you're not done? Foreigner, this is Texas. What can you do? Looking at Robbins Garcia with disdain, the man said proudly. He had to admit that the people here were really despicable. In fact, racial discrimination aside, they had an inexplicable sense of pride for their hometown, especially these cowboys. In fact, being proud of one's hometown was quite a good thing, but there was no need to be so proud. Anyway, Jiang Hai couldn't stand it at all. Like I said, Texans only know how to move their mouths. Looking at these people, Jiang Hai also stood up, patted Robbins Garcia's shoulder, and said to him. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the faces of the cowboys on the opposite side changed. Okay, I'll tell you and let you be convinced. After thinking for a while, the man just now couldn't help but walk out and look at Jiang Hai and Robbins Garcia with an arrogant face. They also knew that they couldn't fight here, otherwise, they would be disqualified. Since they couldn't fight, they would directly show their strength and let these laymen know what they were capable of. The place you said used a helicopter to herd cows is a plain, right? There isn't much grass, but it's very open and quite hot. Looking at Jiang Hai, the young cowboy couldn't help but say. Hearing his words, although Jiang Hai was a little disdainful of him, he also recalled. Indeed, Du Feimin's ranch was the same as what he said. It was a plain, after all, it was transformed from an oasis, so there were grasslands, but not a lot of them. After a few years, it would be much better. The area was also very large, and in the desert, it was naturally quite hot. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai nodded. He didn't say these things just now. It seemed that the cowboy in front of him really had some skills. These are the necessary conditions for using a helicopter to herd cows. Because it's very open, the sound of the helicopter can't be reflected, so the sound isn't as loud as imagined. In addition, people who generally have the financial resources to use helicopters to herd cows will generally install some sound-absorbing steel around their ranch. These steel will absorb the sound and transmit it underground, so the sound of the helicopter won't be particularly loud. At most, it's a dozen decibels louder than a car grazing. The cows can completely withstand it. Looking at Jiang Hai's appearance, the cowboy couldn't help but talk to Jiang Hai. Now that he heard his words, Jiang Hai compared them. It seemed that the sound of several helicopters on Du Feynman's ranch was not much different from the sound of the helicopter on his ranch. Of course, people would feel uncomfortable listening to it. Seeing Jiang Hai's reminiscing look, the man smiled disdainfully and then continued, "The most important thing about using helicopters to herd cattle is that it's fast. Because the pasture is too big, after the cattle are released, they will look for food everywhere. If they keep running around like this, the pasture is too big, and the cattle will easily get lost and die of thirst and anxiety. Using helicopters to herd cattle can gather the cattle at any time, and when they feel that they are about to drink water, they can drive them to the water source. This centralized management is convenient and saves a lot of trouble. The most important thing is that using helicopters to herd cattle is very easy. 5 helicopters can herd 1,000,000 cattle, and this only requires a dozen or so flying cowboys. If they were replaced with ordinary cowboys, at least a few hundred people would be needed, or even 1,000 people would be needed. This is a huge expense." Hearing this person's words, Jiang Hai and Robbins Garcia couldn't help but look at each other. Jiang Hai definitely didn't understand, but he felt that this person's words were very powerful. On the other hand, Robbins Garcia thought about it carefully and felt that what this person said was actually right. After all, he knew a lot more. "Do you understand, layman?" Looking at Jiang Hai and Robbins Garcia's contemplative look, the cowboy laughed disdainfully. "Young man, you're right, but you haven't considered the prerequisite. That is, the cows we want to raise have marbled patterns. Like what I said earlier, no matter how soft the sound is, the cows will still be frightened. Also, when the cows are moving too fast, the fat content in their bodies will decrease and become muscles. How do you solve this?" Looking at the cowboy's disdainful smile, Robbins Garcia picked up his cigarette again, and said to him while filling it with tobacco, "TSK, you guys really can't be that amateurish, right? Marbled beef needs to be raised carefully. As you said, driving helicopters to raise millions of cows, this is mass farming. You want to raise marbled beef? Uncle, you must be dreaming." Hearing Robbins Garcia's words, the young man couldn't help but sneer, then said with a look of disdain, "The whole world knew how terrifying the price of beef was when it was expensive. For example, Japanese Wagyu was really expensive to the point of making people's hair stand on end. As for the method of breeding and even the breed of cattle, some capable people could get it. But why were these cattle not famous outside of Japan? The main problem was the method of breeding. Everyone knew how to raise a Wagyu into a superb breed. Drinking red wine and massaging, these things were known to all. But almost no one knew how to do this. Those top-notch Wagyu were all products raised with such precision. How much did the labor cost now? If they did this, although the beef was expensive, a single cow really couldn't make much money. It might not even be as profitable as raising cattle in batches. Otherwise, no one was stupid. Since they knew how to raise cattle to make money, why didn't they do it? Wasn't it because it wasn't worth it at all? Now that he heard Jiang Hai and the others say that they wanted to raise marbled beef, the young man couldn't help but speak disdainfully. "It's obvious that this kind of kid hasn't seen the world. Let's go, what's there to talk about with them?" Hearing his words, Jiang Hai said to Robbins Garcia. This was considered as revenge for his mockery just now. But it was obvious that some people had to endure if they were insulting you, but if they were insulting them, then they couldn't. When the young cowboy heard Jiang Hai's words, he was instantly ignited and directly jumped up. "You two are amateurs. How dare you say that I haven't seen the world? I've been playing on the ranch since I was 6 years old. It's been 18 years now. Last year, I just won the Texas Cowboy competition. You say that I haven't seen the world?" The young man pointed at Jiang Hai and the others and said loudly. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai was really stunned. This guy really had some background. The first place of the Texas Cowboy competition was very valuable, but unfortunately, his personality was not very likable. 6 years old, 18 years old, that is to say, you are now 24 years old. Didn't your father teach you how to talk to people older than you? Looking at the person in front of him, Jiang Hai chuckled, then looked at the cowboy in front of him and said word by word. You bastard, what are you talking about? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the cowboy's eyes narrowed and he looked at Jiang Hai with a vicious face and said. I'll repeat it again, I said that you have no upbringing. Looking at the young cowboy, Jiang Hai also took a step forward and said condescendingly. You yellow monkey, I think you are looking for death. Listening to Jiang Hai's words, the young man couldn't help but shout loudly. You white pig, let's see who is looking for death. Hearing these obviously racist words, Jiang Hai's face darkened. It was useless to talk to these people. He dared to scold him, so Jiang Hai naturally had to scold him back. At the same time, he clenched his fists. F***ck, this is Texas. But this white pig ignited the fire of war. These cowboys opposite were all white. Without saying anything, they directly rushed out of the cowshed, clenched their fists, and wanted to fight with Jiang Hai. Now they didn't care about the rules here. They just wanted to teach Jiang Hai a lesson. But unfortunately, before they had time to get close, Enchanting Peters had already rushed up from behind. Although he was also white, he didn't mind Jiang Hai's words. Looking at the fiercest cowboy, he didn't say anything and punched him. With a loud bang, the man was instantly knocked to the ground by Enchanting Peters. When the people behind saw this scene, they couldn't help but be stunned and then looked at Enchanting Peters in horror. This man was not small, about 1.85 meters tall. Because he often herded, his body was also a pile of muscles, but at this time, he was knocked down by Enchanting Peters with one punch, which made them quickly calm down. What are you doing? At this time, a group of security guards in uniforms ran over from a distance. There were surveillance cameras in the vicinity. If anything happened here, the people in the distance would know. At first, they thought it was just a normal quarrel, but they didn't expect it to be a fight. Seeing the security guards coming over, these people became excited again. They took a step forward and shouted, but no one dared to rush forward again. What's going on? After separating the two sides, a security guard looked at the people on both sides with a headache and asked. These security guards were not the police. They were only here to maintain order. They did not care about anything. Looking at the scene in front of them, they knew without a doubt that it had something to do with the local culture in Texas. Racial discrimination in Texas was quite serious. Even if it was explicitly stated that such behavior was not allowed, there were still many people who would do so. As the saying goes, the law cannot punish the majority. If you want to live peacefully here, people of color more or less have to learn how to compromise. But outsiders, like Jiang Hai and the others, were different. They only came here for a short period of time, so no one would spoil them. Now looking at the situation, the security guard guessed that the cowboys here should be bullying strangers again. But it doesn't mean that he will care. He just wants to make sure that there is no conflict between the two sides. These three foreigners actually dared to call us white-skinned pigs. Looking at the security guard captain's words, the cowboys here couldn't help but shout with some excitement. In Texas, no one dared to say that to them. Hearing the words of the cowboy, the security guard captain also looked at Jiang Hai with some surprise. Then what do you mean by yellow-skinned monkeys? Hearing his words, Jiang Hai snorted coldly and said slowly. As soon as he heard Jiang Hai's words, the security guard captain's heart skipped a beat, just as he thought. Okay, I can't do anything about this. What do you think? Do you want to call the police? Patting his forehead, the security guard captain said helplessly. It's better for him not to get involved in this matter. Call the police? As soon as they heard these two words, Jiang Hai and the cowboys all quieted down. The cowboys were quiet because they didn't want to call the police. Moreover, they were the ones who started the trouble first. There are surveillance cameras here. If they call the police, they won't be in a good position. As for the insults, no one here recorded it, so who knows who said it. As for Jiang Hai, if someone dared to scold him in Winthrop, they would definitely call the police. But this was Texas, and the most important thing was that Jiang Hai came here to participate in the competition. If he called the police and delayed the competition, then the gains would not make up for the losses. But this was Texas, and Jiang Hai came here to participate in the competition. So he glanced at the other party, waved his hand hatefully, and went straight into his cowshed. The cowboys on the opposite side were not going to call the police. Seeing that Jiang Hai left first, they also shouted a few words, but then they all returned to the cowshed. Seeing this scene, the security guard captain was also happy and relaxed. He turned around and left, but these cowboys looked at Jiang Hai and the others. They couldn't help but feel angry. They were used to being tyrannical here. Now that they suddenly met someone who dared to shout at them, they couldn't stand it. We can't just take this lying down. At this time, the cowboy who was beaten first, who had just recovered, rubbed his blue cheeks and said bitterly, "This is a big loss, he won't easily swallow it." "Then what do you think we should do?" "There are surveillance cameras here." Looking at the cowboy in front of him, the people around him also asked in a low voice. To be honest, they can't take this lying down. This is their home ground. How can they be bullied like this? Isn't this taking a dump on their heads? Aren't these guys here to participate in the competition? There are many ways to deal with them. Now let's contact the other cowboys. We must let these guys go home empty-handed. Rubbing his face, the cowboy here said with a face full of hatred. Hearing his words, the other cowboys also moved. They joined forces to resist Jiang Hai and the others. In their eyes, there was nothing wrong with this. As for Jiang Hai, naturally, he doesn't care. His goal from the beginning was not to fight with these cowboys. His vision is much bigger. Chapter 689. I heard that you had a grudge with the cowboys here during the day. Walton raised his head and looked at Jiang Hai in front of him. He had to admit that doing that kind of thing was addictive. They were busy during the day. When they returned to the hotel at night, Walton and Cheryl Lee didn't even have the leisure to eat. Instead, they directly pulled Jiang Hai into the room. When they stopped, Jiang Hai had to sit up helplessly and prepare to order some food. He hadn't eaten yet. "Yeah, I had some conflicts with them. I told you, I hate the people here." Jiang Hai spread his hands and said to Walton with some speechlessness. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Walton couldn't help but laugh. As a person of color, it was indeed not easy to make a living in Texas. According to the statistics of the United States, pure whites accounted for 52% of the population here. This was calculated more than 10 years ago. Now, it would only be higher than this, not lower than this. The second was Mexican. After all, this place was occupied by Mexico before. Blacks, who accounted for a large proportion of the population in the United States, only accounted for 11.5% here. Germans accounted for 9.9%, and Irish accounted for 7.2%. The unemployment rate of people of color here was as high as 90%. 95.3% of people of color couldn't live here for a lifetime. They would always leave for one reason or another. It could be said that this was a paradise for white people. Even compared to Boston, the birthplace of racial discrimination, this place was worse. There was no other way. The people here were tough, and a large proportion of them were cowboys. These people were stubborn as hell. He was just like that. You could do whatever you wanted, and they were very united. Therefore, whether it was the state government or the United States government, there was nothing they could do about these people. Even though there were clear rules, they still scolded and scolded as they should. Anyway, they didn't have any money to pay. If anyone dared to arrest them, a group of cowboys would surround the police station and cause trouble. This sentence was not wrong at all in this case. As a businessman, you have to learn to hide your emotions so that others can't see your happiness and anger. Only then can you gain the upper hand at the discussion table. You're still too emotional now. Walton looked at the menu in Jiang Hai's hand and smiled. He didn't care that a certain part of his body was squeezed out of shape by Jiang Hai's chest. Well, it seems that I'm not a qualified businessman. Jiang Hai shrugged and said indifferently. These cowboys are very united. They can't do anything to you now, but after the exhibition starts the day after tomorrow, I don't know. You have to be prepared for them to target you. Looking at Jiang Hai, Walton said seriously. Although she didn't know what these people would do, offending these bastards was indeed not a good thing. Well, this is a problem. Okay, I'll pay attention to it. Hearing Walton's words, Jiang Hai froze for a moment. But in his view, these people may only send people to find fault with him, that's all. If someone dares to come over and show off, then Jiang Hai doesn't mind letting them know why the flowers are so red. Jiang Hai's temper is not very good. I want to eat this. Cheryl, what do you want to eat? After finishing the business, Walton pointed at the menu and said. At the same time, she kicked Cheryl Lee in Jiang Hai's arms and asked her. I'm a little sleepy, I don't really want to eat. I'll just eat something. Cheryl Lee opened her eyes in a daze and said with a smile. Her physical fitness was far worse than Walton's. Don't forget, when they were in New York, this girl was abnormally crazy. Jiang Hai was afraid of hurting her body, so he injected a lot of aura into her. Because of this, her current physical fitness was quite good. After fighting with Jiang Hai, she would be able to recover in about 8 to 10 minutes. But for ordinary people like Cheryl Lee, they wouldn't be able to get out of bed easily in less than half an hour. You still have to eat something. What do you want to eat? Taking away Walton's little foot, Jiang Hai put his hand on Cheryl Lee's back, patted it gently, and said to her. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Cheryl Lee forced herself to be alert. Anything is fine, but I want you to feed me. Feed me mouth to mouth. Looking at Jiang Hai, Cheryl Lee said with a smile. You little slut. Listening to Cheryl Lee's request, Walton couldn't help but roll her eyes. This girl is really shameless. Jiang Hai listened to her and agreed with a smile. Then she happily ordered some spaghetti. After dinner was served, the three of them gathered together and had a delicious meal. However, Walton ate by herself, while Cheryl Lee sat naked on Jiang Hai's lap and let Jiang Hai feed her. Looking at the scene in front of her, Walton couldn't help but curl her lips. After eating, she directly threw Cheryl Lee on the bed. It seemed that she was going to reinvigorate herself. The next 2 days could be said to be calm. It was not an exaggeration to use this word to describe it. The person who fancied Walton and wanted to harass her didn't appear. The cowboys were also temporarily honest. It seemed that they were holding back their evil intentions and were waiting for the start of the exhibition to find trouble with Jiang Hai. So in the past few days, Jiang Hai and the others paid special attention, but it was in vain. The other party didn't make any excessive moves. In the blink of an eye, it was time for the exhibition to begin. After all, it was a Texas livestock exhibition. Although the Americans didn't like gongs and drums, firecrackers, red flags, and a sea of people, it was still very lively and quite impressive. It was just that it lacked a lot of formalities. At 6:00 in the morning, Jiang Hai and the others brought their cows to their own exhibition hall. The layout of the exhibition hall was much better than that of the cowshed. Each cow lived in a separate compartment. The compartment was surrounded by iron fences, allowing the cows to graze freely. Meanwhile, people could observe the situation of the cows from all directions. This was also the standard of the judges for the first 3 days. After the cows were sent to the exhibition hall, Jiang Hai also received the details of the evaluation. The first 3 days were to evaluate the appearance of the cows, the size, the color of their hair, the brightness of their eyes, the tidiness of their teeth, whether there were any congenital defects, and so on. These were all things that had to be looked at. Each cow had its own independent interface. These judges would hide in the crowd and walk in to look at the cows. Then, they would give the cows a score. The highest score was 10, and the lowest score was 0. There were also 8 options for scoring, which were similar to what was described above. Jiang Hai didn't look too carefully, but he knew that in terms of Angus cattle, his cows were worthy of being kings. Even if they were compared to other cows, he wouldn't be afraid. After looking at the situation, Jiang Hai didn't care about Robbins Garcia and the others who were very nervous around him. He slowly walked out of the exhibition hall. Jiang Hai had 1.2 million points of confidence in his beef cows. He didn't even have confidence in his cows. Walking out of the exhibition hall, Jiang Hai also looked at the people around him. He had to admit that the Texas Yak Show was much bigger than the one in New York. Although he didn't like the people here, the cows here were indeed the most abundant in the United States, no, even the world. It was also very good. According to the display above, the Texas Yak Show was divided into 2 areas, namely the animal husbandry area and the rodeo area. The rodeo area was much smaller than the animal husbandry area. Starting from the preliminary round, there were a total of 3 major events: equestrian, goat snatching, and bull riding. Equestrian was divided into equestrian taming and horsemanship. Horsemanship was to ride a horse through obstacles. It wasn't the kind of dressage, but the kind of competition that tested a cowboy's horsemanship. It was the same for goat snatching. Among a flock of sheep, who could find the target sheep the fastest? Of course, it wasn't based on the sheep's face, but on the sheep's body. But whoever rode the horse first and carried the sheep from the flock to the finish line would be the winner. The last one was bull riding. Jiang Hai had seen this before in the country's imperial court. It was just some simple protective gear, and then ride on a mad bull to see who could last the longest. This competition was also the most dangerous one. First, it was really dangerous to fall from the bull's back. Second, the mad bull might attack the rider who fell to the ground. Every year, people would be injured or even killed in this competition. But in the United States, especially in the cowboy circle, this competition was the most eye-catching. The 3 competitions were divided into 3 days. After 3 days, the 64 people with the best results would enter the finals and start competing again. Obviously, ordinary tourists preferred to see the cowboys. So, early in the morning, the cowboy arena was already full of people. On the other hand, Jiang Hai's side was deserted, but no one was in a hurry. There was nothing to be anxious about, because the selection here wasn't like the cowboys who fought for their own glory. They were here to do business. The tourists went to see the people, but the businessmen came to see the cows. This was the real money. Compared to the New York Beef Show, the Animal Husbandry Show's exhibition hall was about 5 times bigger than the one in New York. The security was more decent, and there were more exhibition halls. There wasn't anything messy, and there was no voting for tourists. *T, the place here was bigger and more professional. At least in this respect, Jiang Hai had to admit that Texas was really good. Get out of the way, get out of the way, get out of the way. But just as Jiang Hai was standing at the door, a slightly panicked voice suddenly came from the distance. Then, Jiang Hai turned his head and saw a stinky cart filled with cow dung running towards him quickly. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai subconsciously wanted to get out of the way, but the cart seemed to be targeting him and ran straight towards him. Who the F***ck? Jiang Hai's reaction was not slow, but the cart was faster. At the same time, Jiang Hai glanced around and found that the cowboys nearby were looking at him with smiles on their faces. Of course, there was also a trace of strong disdain. Seeing that the cart full of cow dung was about to hit Jiang Hai instantly jumped back and dodged the cart. The people behind the cart didn't think that Jiang Hai could actually dodge at such a fast speed. They were stunned for a moment. But this person was worthy of being called a ruthless person. Since he couldn't hit Jiang Hai, he directly did it. His hand tilted, and the cart full of cow dung fell directly towards Jiang Hai. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai immediately took a few steps back. But although he retreated beyond the safety line, the cart of cow dung was directly in front of his exhibition hall. In an instant, a stench came from under the cart, making the people who were originally walking on this road subconsciously retreat to the side. What do you mean by this? Looking at the cow dung in front of his door, Jiang Hai's eyes were about to spit fire. He thought about it and understood that this guy should be in cahoots with those cowboys. The reason why he did such a thing was that those cowboys made a move. What do you mean by I? What do you mean? You just want to watch my cart fall down? Didn't you say that hua xia is the help of etiquette? Why don't you want to touch the cart for me? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the man couldn't help but put his hands on his waist and said with an angry face. Hearing his unreasonable words, Jiang Hai laughed. He had seen shameless people, but he had never seen such a shameless person. Why would he touch the dung cart for him? Help of etiquette? Is help of etiquette used for this? I'll help your uncle. Hurry up and get these things out of here. Looking at the man in front of him, Jiang Hai's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. Oh, I won't do it. Hit me if you can. However, the man in front of him was really shameless. He looked straight at Jiang Hai and said. Hearing this man's annoying words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but clench his fists, but fortunately, he held back. If he made the first move, he wasn't afraid of the police and money, but the exhibition hall would be destroyed. Boss, calm down. Call security. At this time, Robbins Garcia came out of the exhibition hall and looked at the angry Jiang Hai. He pulled Jiang Hai to the wind, then said something to Jiang Hai, then called Birkdahl. In fact, he didn't need to say anything. Birkdahl had already contacted the security guards. The quality of the security guards here was very good. Soon, a group of security guards rushed over, but when they arrived, they couldn't help but cover their noses and retreat far away. It should be known that cows were quite smelly. Cows especially like to fart, and their poop was especially smelly. The smell was really pungent. Looking at the situation in front of them, they couldn't help but look at Jiang Hai and the man pushing the cart. What's the meaning of this? Hearing Barton's words, Jiang Hai's eyes narrowed and he couldn't help but take a step forward. However, Barton smiled and retreated, leaving just like that. Boss, what do we do now? Do you want me to catch him and teach him a lesson? Seeing Barton leave and Jiang Hai can't do anything to him, Bell Lester couldn't help but frown. He walked to Jiang Hai's side and asked him. We can't just do it. What about Robbins now? Jiang Hai patted Bell's shoulder and looked at Robbins Garcia and said. He gave Jiang Hai a reassuring look and walked directly to the security guard who was still standing here. I want to see your manager, tell him to come and see me. Robbins Garcia looked at the security guard in front of him and said calmly. You want to see our manager, what's the matter? When they heard that they wanted to see the manager, not only the domestic staff would be a little scared, but these security guards would also be a little scared, so they looked at Robbins Garcia and said. Look at our exhibition hall. I think you work here, so you should be familiar with it. We spent a total of $1.3 million to rent this exhibition hall for 7 days, $1.3 million. Now there is a pile of cow dung in front of our exhibition hall. I want to ask the manager here what's the meaning of this. Now I want to change the exhibition hall, or according to the contract, triple the compensation. Robbins Garcia looked at the security guard in front of him and said with a serious face. Hearing his words, the security guard here sweated all of a sudden. Perhaps for the exhibition, triple the compensation is not a lot, but this money is in the pockets of these people, how can they spit it out? If they have to pay $3.9 million, they definitely won't take the money, and it is very likely that they will vent their anger on the security guard. This is a mistake in our work. I don't think we should alarm the manager. As for this pile of cow dung, I'll take care of it. After thinking for a while, the security guard said hesitantly. People under the eaves had no choice but to lower their heads. Now, he was already cursing Barton in his heart. Of course, there was also Robbins Garcia. These damn foreigners, but he couldn't say that out loud. After hesitating for a while, the security guard looked at his subordinates, but when he looked at them, these security guards politely avoided his gaze. What a joke, they can smell the cow dung. Whoever wants to do it can do it. Anyway, they don't want to do it. They can't earn much money a day as security guards here. When the time comes, they will be smelly and disgusting. The loss outweighs the gain. Americans were extremely picky about their jobs. They would rather quit the job than suffer from it. Looking at the evasive gaze of his subordinates, the security guard here is really in trouble. Well, I'll leave it to you. After 10 minutes, if this pile of shit is still here, I'm going to find your manager. Hearing the security guard's words, Robbins Garcia said with a serious face. After speaking, he walked to Jiang Hai's side. Jiang Hai also gave him a thumbs up. Sometimes, having an elder at home is like having a treasure. Robbins Garcia should talk about this at this time. Hearing Robbins Garcia's words, the security guard here couldn't help but sigh. He gritted his teeth. He signed a captain-level contract with this exhibition. He was not a temporary worker. It would be difficult for him to give up this job. So after hesitating for a while, he decided to do it. Then he borrowed a shovel from Jiang Hai and asked his subordinates to turn the cow dung cart over. Then he resisted the urge to vomit and shoveled the cow dung into the cart. When he was almost done, he covered his nose and went to the side to vomit. After that, he stubbornly pushed the cart of cow dung away. Although it took half an hour, the cow dung was finally dealt with, but the smell didn't dissipate so easily. Jiang Hai and the others deliberately pulled out a water pipe from the exhibition hall and washed the ground here. The smell was quite strong. It didn't disperse for a long time. There weren't many people in the beef exhibition hall, and most people would walk around when they came to Jiang Hai's exhibition hall. It was really too smelly. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai and the others sitting in the exhibition hall had ugly expressions. But what could they do? When he thought of Barton, Jiang Hai couldn't help but gnash his teeth in anger. He was sure that Barton did it on purpose. At this time, Barton had already returned from outside. There was a circle of gauze wrapped around his hand. Of course, it was just a disguise. He quietly walked into the exhibition hall. This exhibition hall was much bigger than the one Jiang Hai and the others were in. In the entire hall, there were almost 100 cows and more than a dozen different species. There were also a lot of people here. There were also 3 letters hanging outside the hall, SSR. Yes, this was one of the biggest livestock companies in Texas, SSR. It was also the company that had a conflict with Jiang Hai. After the man named Barton came in, he went straight to the lounge next door. In this lounge, he saw the man flirting with a female employee, so he coughed lightly and knocked on the door. Hearing that someone was here, the female employee immediately stood up and tidied up her clothes. She then winked at Barton and left. Barton's gaze followed the woman as she left. Fortunately, the man noticed him. Ahem, how's it going? Looking at Barton, the person inside pretended to look through the information and said to him. It's done. That Jiang Hai is really looking for trouble. Not only did he offend all the cowboys in Texas, he also offended you. If he didn't only participate in livestock shows, I would have already dealt with him. If he participates in a cowboy competition, I can guarantee that he won't have a complete ending. When he heard the man's words, Barton had a flattering expression on his face. Then he walked forward while talking. When the man heard Barton's words, he couldn't help but grin. This man was called Roland Shalater. He was the one who had a conflict with Jiang Hai. Originally, he was still thinking about how to deal with Jiang Hai. After all, he hadn't been thrown out in a long time. But it was impossible to do it openly. Because Jiang Hai wasn't a person who lacked money. If he did it openly, he would lose face. So he could only play dirty. Just as he was thinking about how to deal with Jiang Hai, he suddenly heard that Jiang Hai had offended all the cowboys in Texas. In fact, in Texas, if you offend a white cowboy, it was the same as offending all the cowboys in Texas. After all, the number of people of color was still too small, let alone a cowboy. And this morning, he also heard that these cowboys wanted to deal with Jiang Hai. He had to admit that these cowboys were too simple-minded. They thought about it for 2 days, and the only way they came up with was to block the exhibition hall. They just directly pulled some people out and blocked Jiang Hai's exhibition hall. It was like some gangsters in China asking for protection. They didn't beat you or scold you. They just sat at the door and didn't let others in. In their opinion, if they don't let the judges in, then Jiang Hai's *T won't get any points. Naturally, he won't get any awards, no matter how good his *T was. However, when Roland Shalide heard the news, he couldn't help but smile. These guys' brains were filled with muscles. In such a situation, wouldn't Jiang Hai inform the organizers? For the sake of their reputation, the organizers definitely wouldn't let these cowboys do that. They would just send security guards to drive these people away. At that time, if there was any conflict, with the Americans' mentality, it was very likely that they would help build momentum for Jiang Hai's exhibition hall. If they wanted to ruin Jiang Hai's exhibition hall, they had to think of a special way. They had to make people hate his exhibition hall from the bottom of their hearts. They wouldn't be willing to go near it and spread rumors. The time was too short and Jiang Hai was a foreigner, so the effect wouldn't be good. Then they had to be more direct and make people unable to go in. That's why this morning's scene happened. This Barton was a Texas cowboy and also a member of his company. What he did today was taught by Roland Shalide. He had to admit that this guy had some talent in acting. Jiang Hai hated him so much that his teeth itched. "Boss, we've finished Jiang Hai today. What are we going to do tomorrow? Do we still have to get cow dung?" Seeing that Roland Shalide was very satisfied with his actions this time, Barton couldn't help but laugh. At the same time, he rubbed his hands and said to Roland Shalide with a serious face, "They wouldn't just take revenge once. Tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, until Jiang Hai got out of here, they would disgust him. Tomorrow, it's still cow dung, but we'll add more ingredients in it." Roland Shalide couldn't help but laugh when he thought of Jiang Hai's expression when he saw the truck full of cow dung. The more exasperated Jiang Hai was, the happier he was. "How's today?" Soon, the sun set in the west and the exhibition gradually came to an end. After the tourists left first, the beef cattle and cowboys also returned to their places. After Jiang Hai's beef cattle rushed back to the nest, Robbins Garcia took the first shift. Burkdollar came again in the second half of the night. After dawn, Jiang Hai and the others came again to take the cattle to the exhibition hall. After settling the cattle, Jiang Hai also returned to the hotel. As soon as he came back, he saw that Cheryl Lee was waiting for him in the room. Seeing that Jiang Hai was a little tired, Cheryl Lee came over and asked him, It's a little troublesome. Why is it only you? Where's Pa Walton?" With a chuckle, Jiang Hai asked Cheryl Lee. "Pa will come back a little later tonight. The staff of Sam's Club came over. She wants to invite them to dinner tonight. Connerson Peters is with her." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Cheryl Lee also explained with a smile. She's not here. I thought I could come back and ask her for her opinion." After throwing his coat on the sofa, Jiang Hai lay on the bed and looked at the ceiling. Jiang Hai felt that this matter might not be over. Chapter 691. What's wrong? Can you tell me about it? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Cheryl Lee couldn't help but raise her head with some doubts and said to Jiang Hai. Looking at her appearance, Jiang Hai thought for a moment, then shook his head and said, "Actually, it's nothing. Didn't I offend the cowboys here a while ago? Originally, I had been guarding against them, so I asked Belle and the others to be careful. As a result, I was still tricked by them today. Hearing Cheryl Lee's words, Jiang Hai sat up and said slowly. Hearing that Jiang Hai was tricked, Cheryl Lee immediately came over and looked at Jiang Hai with some concern. It's nothing, I was just disgusted by them. Looking at her eyes, Jiang Hai smiled and patted her hand. No matter how lawless those people were, they didn't dare to directly find trouble with Jiang Hai. But today's behavior was really too disgusting. Then Jiang Hai told Cheryl Lee about what happened today. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Cheryl Lee was stunned. They can be so shameless. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Cheryl Lee couldn't help but say with some surprise. Yeah, it's quite shameless. She nodded. Even a shameless person like Jiang Hai said these people were boring. How shameless are these people? It really made Jiang Hai seem to be angered by both humans and gods. This matter is really not easy to deal with. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Cheryl Lee couldn't help but rub her head and say. These people can't be beaten, and scolding them won't relieve her anger. Moreover, they threw cow dung today. Jiang Hai doesn't believe that they will stop tomorrow. Thinking of this, Cheryl Lee couldn't help but feel a little numb because she didn't know what to do. The two of them sat on the big bed of the hotel, staring at each other, but they really couldn't think of any solution. My name is MT, Iron Wall Body. At this moment, Jiang Hai's cell phone rang. Looking at the phone, Jiang Hai picked it up. The person who called is none other than AI Xiaoxi. They call each other every night and it's time now. Hello, Jiang Hai, have you eaten? A crisp voice came from the other side of the phone, followed by others' greetings. Not yet. Listening to AI Xiaoxi's words, Jiang Hai also smiled. Listening to their voices, Jiang Hai seemed to even lighten up. It's so late and you haven't eaten yet? Are you very busy? Listening to Jiang Hai's words, Feng Yunshan on the other side suddenly interjected. It's okay that I'm busy, but there are some things that are bothering me. Taking a deep breath, Jiang Hai said helplessly. He wasn't the type to only report good news. He would report good news and bad news. He was so annoyed today that he couldn't think of a solution by himself. Rather than that, he might as well talk to AI Xiaoxi and the others. Even if he couldn't think of a solution, he could treat it as a way to reduce his stress. Without AI Xiaoxi and the others asking, Jiang Hai talked about today's matter. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, the other side couldn't help but be quiet. How is it? It's very troublesome. Hearing the other side quiet down, Jiang Hai couldn't help but say with a headache. Is it very troublesome? It's okay. But at this moment, AI Xiaoxi suddenly said. Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be stunned. Is it very simple? How do we break this situation? Listening to AI Xiaoxi's voice on the phone, Jiang Hai said with some eagerness. Actually, this matter is very simple. In my hometown, there are also such people, but they are not cowboys, they are hoodlums. But from what you said, they are almost the same as the cowboys there. These people eat, drink, have sex, gamble, and smoke every day. Many of them are addicted to flour and the like, squandering their family fortune, their bodies are ruined, and they are sick. But they still need money to do these things, so they will blackmail some rich people and throw dead mice, dead cats, and the like into the yard of these rich people. You can't hit them, but with their physical condition, one punch is enough to make them lie in bed for half a year, and then you have to take care of them for half a year. Listening to AI Xiaoxi's words, Jiang Hai frowned. If such a person was by his side, he really wanted to beat him to death. But if he dies with such a person, it's really not worth it. It's similar to the current situation, but it's not so bad. What's the solution? Listening to AI Xiaoxi's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but ask with some doubts. There are two ways to solve this. One is to directly find the local police. If you have a good relationship with them, find the police to arrest them. After you teach them a lesson inside, they won't come to provoke you when they come out. Of course, the premise is that you can't provoke them. The second is to confront them head-on. Didn't he pour cow dung on you here? Then you can dump cow dung on them too. Listening to AI Xiaoxi's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be stunned. Yes, if they dump cow dung on me, then I can dump cow dung on them too. Giving them a taste of their own medicine. But the prerequisite is that you have to know who the other party is. If it's really like what you said, your opponent is just a small cowboy, in fact, I think it's better to find someone to beat them up. If you're still angry, you can try Croton. At this time, Qi Jie's voice came from the phone, but there was a trace of strangeness in her words. Croton. Listening to Qi Jie's words, Jiang Hai was a little confused. Isn't this game for diarrhea? What do I do with this thing? You have to find those people who hurt you, and then you have to find a way to give them some Croton. Don't worry, this thing can't be detected in the United States. The medical system in the United States is very poor. They can't even detect food poisoning. At most, they can only prescribe some medicine to stop diarrhea, but you can make them feel good. Listening to Qi Jie's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but touch his chin. This is a good idea. But the most important thing now is that you have to know who is targeting you. This is also very important. Feeling that Jiang Hai listened, Qi Jie also said seriously on the phone. It was impossible to directly face the entire state. It was important to find the person who stood out. Okay, I got it. After Qi Jie and others studied it, Jiang Hai also had a rough idea. He has never been a very obedient person. He will make trouble for these people no matter how others make trouble for him. He has never been a kind person. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai did not stay at home. Instead, he went downstairs and drove to the cowshed. Less than half an hour after he left, Pra Walton also came back. When she saw that Jiang Hai was not in the hotel, she was stunned, and after Cheryl Lee told her about Jiang Hai today, she couldn't help but laugh. Then Pra Walton made a phone call, and a man with a slightly anxious tone was on the other side of the phone. Miss Walton, I don't know if Mr. Jiang would like to meet and talk about the cooperation? Before Pra Walton could speak, the person on the other side of the phone said seriously. It could be heard that his words were extremely anxious. Jiang Hai doesn't know about the cooperation because he is out, but I can take you directly to the exhibition hall tomorrow to see him. You can also see his cow. What do you think? Mr. Sean. Listening to the anxious voice on the other side of the phone, Pra Walton said with a smile. Of course, no problem. Hearing Pra Walton's words, the man named Sean on the other side of the phone agreed. It's solved. After hanging up the phone, Pra Walton looked at the puzzled Cheryl Lee and said with a smile. Cheryl Lee blinked. In fact, to be honest, she didn't understand how it was solved, but she believed in Pra Walton. At this time, Jiang Hai didn't know that Pula Walton had helped him solve this seemingly troublesome matter. He was still studying his own plan. Croton and the like, he could just buy it now. Jiang Hai knew that there was a sea merchant supermarket nearby. If there was a sea merchant supermarket, it meant that there was a Chinese settlement. If he wanted to buy some Croton there, it wouldn't be a very troublesome thing. As long as he didn't kill anyone, it would be a small matter. If he wanted to find out who was dealing with him, the person named Barton was very important. But if he wanted to find out where he was, he would have to use other people. After all, he was too eye-catching. Robbins Garcia was also at the scene of the conflict that day, so it was inconvenient for him to show up. Burke Dollar was naturally more boring and not suitable for inquiring about things. Belle Lester was a very good candidate. Young, frivolous, and because he had lived in the Triangle State, his spoken English was very good. He was indeed the best candidate to find someone. After arriving at the cowshed, Jiang Hai talked to Belle Lester. Bell Lester immediately left the cowshed. After changing his clothes, he inquired about a Texas cowboy bar and sneaked in. In Texas, cowboys were one of the symbols here. Naturally, the cowboy bar here was also quite popular. Of course, he couldn't go in wrong because in the United States, sometimes cowboys also represented another culture. In the past, the Chinese director Ang Lee once made a movie that caused a sensation in Hollywood. It was called Brokeback Mountain. The protagonists in the movie were two cowboys, and then they cough. In the words of a song, the general idea was gay friends in the wind and rain. But in the United States, cowboy bars and sailor bars were sometimes bars that engaged in that kind of special relationship. Bell was very straight, straighter than steel, so he must go to a normal bar. Fortunately, he was also a cowboy, so he still knew how to distinguish. After finding the bar, he paid the entrance fee. Of course, it was paid by Jiang Hai. He walked into the bar. He sat down at the bar and ordered a glass of expensive wine. Then, he listened to the music as he drank. As soon as he walked in, he attracted a lot of attention. Of course, most of them were women. Bell was quite eye-catching in general. He was fair and clean. Because he had a good figure, he especially liked to wear a small shirt that could show off his muscles unless it was winter. There was a Special Forces identity tag hanging around his neck. Years of military life made him like to keep a very unique buzz cut. When he stayed in places like bars and nightclubs, it was indeed quite attractive. A wild, handsome white guy who used to be a soldier was enough to make those women go crazy. Looking at those women who were throwing flirtatious glances at him, if it was a normal day, Bell would have used his flirting skills. But today, he had business to do. After drinking a glass of wine, he ordered another one and then looked at the bartender. "Hey man, your music here is really good," Bell said while shaking his head slowly. "Of course, our music, wine, and beautiful women here are the best in San Antonio." Hearing Bell's praise, the bartender here also said with excitement. At the same time, his eyes were also looking at a beautiful woman on the dance floor in the distance. Hearing his words, Bell also glanced back. He remembered that this beautiful woman just gestured to him, so he chuckled. This guy is about to take the bait. Music and wine, I've tasted it. Beautiful woman, I'm going to try it. Taking out a Franklin and stuffing it into the jar next to him, Bell finished speaking and walked into the crowd. Not long after, he returned to the bar with a beautiful woman in each arm, then winked at the bartender, but the bartender's face was a little ugly, because one of the beautiful women in Bell's arms at this time was his goddess. Seeing his gaze, Bell was more sure that he did the right thing. "Hey, beautiful women, I saw a scene when I was at the exhibition today. It was so interesting. A guy hurt his hand and then threw cow dung everywhere." Cow dung, huh? After a few simple greetings, and after ordering wine, Bell laughed and told what happened today as a joke to the two girls, and the girls were very happy to hear it. They didn't really come to listen to jokes. Naturally, they will like to listen to whatever Bell says. They only care about Bell and the Franklin in his pocket. But this scene, in the eyes of the bartender opposite, was burning with jealousy. Hurt his hand? Hey, bro, you probably don't know the details. Just now, he endured for a long time and didn't interrupt. Now that he finally had a chance to speak, the bartender said slowly while wiping the wine glass. "Oh. Is there any secret in this?" Hearing the bartender's words, Bell's eyes narrowed and he pretended not to care. "Of course, the person who turned the car over is called Willie Barton. He is right there. Do you think he hurt his hand?" When the bartender heard Bell's words, he smiled proudly and pointed to the guy who was dancing hard on the dance floor. Chapter 692. Following the bartender's gaze, Bell glanced at the crowd. Sure enough, he saw the guy dancing on the dance floor. Although the lights were a bit dim, Bell recognized him at a glance. It was Barton. He was still wearing his daytime clothes and had a piece of gauze wrapped around his arm. It was this guy who looked like an idiot when he was dancing, but he caused a lot of trouble for Jiang Hai. After knowing his goal, Bale smiled. He remembered Jiang Hai's words. First, don't expose yourself, so as not to alert the enemy. Second, find out who was behind this guy. Was it someone who was targeting Jiang Hai, or was it the Texas Cowboys? These 2 points might be troublesome for others, but for Bell, it was a piece of cake. After confirming the identity of the person, Bell deliberately placed a wine glass in front of him. Then, he placed the watch he bought for $50,000 against the glass. Seeing his actions, the 2 girls beside him were surprised. They clearly saw that this watch was from Jordan's Legacy series. This watch was sold for $520,000 in China, but it wasn't that expensive in the United States. It was only $50,000, but it was still $50,000. People here might not even make $50,000 in a year. Looking at the watch, they were a bit shocked. The 2 girls were shocked at the wealth of this man who looked good, and the bartender was shocked at how bold this guy was. He actually dared to take off the watch. Right now, he was only thinking maliciously if Barton forgot to take it with him. If he didn't, then he would have to pick it up. But unfortunately, Bell put the watch here mainly to use the reflection of the dial to observe Barton's movements. Watches like this don't reflect light, because they were afraid of dazzling the eyes. Well, it could also be for other reasons. But Bell knew how to make it reflect light. He just needed to borrow a wine glass. So he was multitasking. While chatting with the 2 girls, he was also observing Barton. After about half an hour, the 2 girls were almost leaning on him. It was as if they were saying, "Hurry up and take me away, I can't hold it anymore." But Bell was still calm. Finally, Barton finished his dance. Perhaps he was a little tired, so he said goodbye to his partner and walked to the bathroom in the distance. Seeing him move, Belle also moved. Under the bartender's disappointed gaze, she picked up the watch and put it on her wrist. "I'm going to the bathroom, then we'll leave, okay?" Looking at the 2 intoxicated girls, Belle said with a smile. "Of course." Facing Belle's invitation, the 2 girls weren't shy or embarrassed. Instead, they said this with a smile. They had been waiting for Belle to say this, and now that Belle finally said it, they naturally wouldn't oppose it. After Belle finished talking to them, he chuckled and followed Barton to the bathroom. The bathroom here is not like the bathrooms in the nightclubs. There are often people having sex in there, so even outside the men's bathroom, there are a lot of people lining up. This cowboy bar is not so messy, so there are no people outside the men's bathroom. After Belle watched Willie Barton walk in, he followed him in. At the same time, he picked up a plastic bag from the trash can next to him. After walking into the bathroom, Belle glanced at the urinal area and saw that only Willie Barton was there. Belle walked over and directly put the plastic bag on his head without saying a word. Willie Barton felt that his vision turned black, and breathing became difficult in an instant. Willie Barton couldn't help but struggle immediately, but unfortunately, Belle was much more ruthless than him. Seeing him struggling, Belle punched him directly in the stomach. In an instant, the man couldn't struggle anymore, but the early struggle still had some effect. At least the plastic bag was broken, so he could breathe normally. Then Belle went up and kicked him without saying a word. After a minute, Barton recovered. Sorry, brother, who are you? Stop hitting, what's going on? Damn it, who the hell is it?" Feeling Belle's punches and kicks, Willie Barton didn't do anything other than holding his head, and it was impossible for him to do anything else. Willie's punch just now was enough to make him lose his fighting power. How could he resist? "Kid, is your name Willie Barton?" "Don't deny it, I've been watching you all night. Do you remember who the woman you danced with today?" "It doesn't matter if I tell you, that's my wife. I saw you touch her body no less than 30 times. Hee, I think you don't want your hand anymore." Belle grabbed Willie Barton's collar and said angrily. However, his words were now in a Texas accent, mixed with a hint of Mexican. I really don't know, really, brother, let me go, I will never appear in front of him again. She is a typical white woman, wearing a purple-red deep V-neck shirt. She does look a little old, about 30 years old. She does look like a married woman, but he didn't expect that the husband of this married woman would also come. Thinking of this, Willie Barton couldn't help but shout loudly. It's too late, your hand is mine. Belle heard Willie Barton's words and laughed sinisterly. No, I'm from SSR Company, brother, we're all Texans, let's talk things over. Hearing that Belle was going to take his hand, Willie Barton couldn't help but start randomly mentioning people. Unfortunately, he only knew one of the higher-ups. SSR Company? After hearing Willie Barton's words, Belle's heart skipped a beat, but he still pretended to be confused and fearful. As a native of Texas, there was no way he didn't know about SSR. It was a giant company. Of course, that was only for the average cowboy. Knowing that Willie Barton was a native of Texas would be a little intimidated. Yes, I'm from SSR Company. I just got in touch with their CEO's son, Roland Shalide. Today I did something big for them. Maybe it was out of fear, or maybe it was to show off his relationship with Roland Shalide, Willie Green immediately said. Bastard. I must be a crazy Texan. Remember, you haven't seen me before, or I'll take you to hell with me, you bastard. Pretending to be crazy and scared, Belle shouted loudly in Willie Barton's ear, and finally kicked his stomach before leaving the bathroom. But as soon as he left, he changed into a different appearance. He returned to the bar with a smile, and under the envious gaze of the bartender, he left the bar with the two blondes in his arms and went to a small hotel nearby to get a room. As for what he was going to do, it was needless to say. After being satisfied, Belle threw down $200, then went downstairs and drove back to the cowshed. As for Willie Barton, it took him 2 minutes to rush out of the bathroom like a madman, but unfortunately, he was destined to come up empty-handed. With a swollen face, he found the woman just now, but while he was in the bathroom, the woman had already thrown herself into the arms of another man. Willie Barton knew this man, he was a veteran cowboy in the area, and he couldn't afford to offend him. In the end, he could only bitterly give up and pretend that he stepped on someone's **** when he went out today. After paying for tonight's drinks, he went to the nearby red light district with a face full of dissatisfaction. He needed to vent his anger. On the other side, after Belle returned to the cowshed, he told the news to Jiang Hai, who was guarding there. So it's SSR Company behind this. How should we deal with these guys? Rubbing his chin, Jiang Hai began to think. Tomorrow, let's get a truck full of cow dung and dump it in front of their company. What do you think? Belle whispered to Jiang Hai when he saw him thinking. Hearing this, Jiang Hai hesitated for a moment, and decided to dump cow dung. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But the problem was, this was too childish. Jiang Hai didn't want to do this. If he was going to do it, he had to do it even more ruthlessly. And what was more ruthless than cow dung? Human dung. But it would be very disgusting to do this, and Jiang Hai didn't want to disgust himself. Maybe the miraculous Chinese medicine of Hua Xia will come in handy. Jiang Hai thought for a moment and said with a smirk. Jiang Hai patted Belle, indicating that he should go back to sleep first. Jiang Hai, on the other hand, was thinking about what to do tomorrow. The night passed quickly. Soon, it was dawn. Robbins Garcia and Burke Dollar had also arrived. Belle had rested for the night and was in good spirits. The three cowboys cooperated with the cart and pulled the 3 cows to their own exhibition hall, ready to start the show. Jiang Hai drove his car and left first. He went to San Antonio's Chinatown. In the United States, as long as it was a big city, there would be a Chinatown. It was just a matter of size. As mentioned earlier, people of color in Texas didn't live very well, so the Chinatown here wasn't very big. However, this was the 7th largest city in the United States after all. In terms of cities alone, there were still many people here. There was also a sea merchant supermarket here. Jiang Hai went to the supermarket first and explained the situation to the person. Of course, he had called Zhang Dihai before this, and the old man also clearly explained Jiang Hai's situation to this person. So when Jiang Hai came, the person in the supermarket took Jiang Hai to the nearby Chinese medicine hall. There, Jiang Hai bought croton with the name of the sea market, but it was not the normal grain, but croton powder. This kind of medicine was originally used to treat illnesses in traditional Chinese medicine, just like the original marijuana. It was medicine, not poison. Croton was used to treat chest and abdominal pain, lack of bowel movement, diarrhea, dysentery, and other diseases, but Jiang Hai was using it to harm people. After confirming that the hospital in the United States wouldn't be able to detect this thing, Jiang Hai left the place. After returning to the exhibition hall, Jiang Hai and Belle looked at each other. They were going to take revenge today. The exhibition hall was left to Robbins Garcia and Burke Dollar, so they could handle everything. Jiang Hai and Belle went to the SSR exhibition hall. Just as they were about to head to the SSR exhibition hall, Roland Schalater called Willie Barton over. "What happened to you?" Looking at the bruised and swollen face of Willie Barton, Roland Salad was stunned for a moment, then asked him. When I came home last night, the lights were too dark, so I fell." "Boss, if you have something to say, just say it." Hearing Roland Schalader's words, Willie Green had an awkward smile on his face. Indeed, this matter was too embarrassing for him. "Forget it, I don't care how you got this injury. Is today's cow dung ready?" Looking at Willie Barton in front of him, Roland Schalader said with a serious face. "It seems that he is addicted to tricking Jiang Hai. Don't worry, I added something today." Hearing Roland Schalader's words, Willie Barton also said with a serious smile on his face. "That's good, then let's do it." Looking at Willie Barton's smile, Roland Schalader was sure that this guy wouldn't let him down. But just as the two were about to discuss again, suddenly there was a commotion in front of the exhibition hall. Roland Schalader heard the noise in front of him and walked out of the lounge. As a result, he saw Jiang Hai walking inside at a glance. As soon as he saw Jiang Hai coming in, his right eyelid couldn't help but twitch. He felt that Jiang Hai seemed to be here to denounce him, so he immediately winked at Willie Barton, and he immediately hid in the lounge next to him. "Sir, you can't force your way in." At this time, the staff in front were still trying hard to stop Jiang Hai, but how could they stop Jiang Hai's strength? He just pushed the crowd aside and walked inside, saying, "Isn't this the exhibition hall? I'm here to learn, why are you stopping me?" Listening to Jiang Hai's words, the people here couldn't say anything. "Don't stop him, go do what you need to do." At this moment, Roland Schalader came up from behind after tidying up his suit. He looked at Jiang Hai in front of him, raised his head proudly, and said to Jiang Hai. Seeing the main character come out, Jiang Hai also quietly made a gesture behind his back. The show is about to start. Chapter 693. Nothing, I just came to see the strength of one of the top livestock companies in Texas. This exhibition hall is indeed much bigger than mine. Hearing Roland Salad's words, Jiang Hai also said seriously. "Oh, it is indeed much bigger than yours. After all, we are a company here." "Oh, sorry, I heard that you are also a company, Tinglong Company?" It's really a company." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Roland Salad also said with a smile. He felt that when his voice fell, Jiang Hai's face became a little ugly. "Don't be complacent, you were the one who poured cow dung in front of my exhibition hall yesterday." Narrowing his eyes, Jiang Hai looked at Roland Salad and said seriously. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, Roland Salad's eyes also narrowed, but he did not retreat. "Oh. I don't understand what you are talking about. Although there are some contradictions between us, I am still a businessman after all. A businessman should focus on making money, right? I don't understand what I can get by pouring cow dung in front of your exhibition hall. You are not really naive to think that those cows in your exhibition hall can get a ranking. Gently touching the ring on his finger, Roland Salad said with a smile. You're just pretending to be confused. Willie Barton. Hearing him directly deny his words, Jiang Hai also took a step forward. Again, I don't know what you are talking about. Shrugging, Roland Salad would not admit it. But his expression was clearly saying, yes, I did it. What can you do about it? You are pretending to be ignorant. Looking at Roland's expression, Jiang Hai didn't say anything. He instantly stretched out his hands and lifted Roland's shawlid up. As soon as he lifted Roland's shawlid, almost everyone gathered around him. However, Roland Shawlid stretched out his hand and stopped these people in midair. Don't come over. Turn on your phone and start recording. At the same time, inform the security guard. I want to see if he has the guts to beat me. Listening to Roland Salad's words, the people here hesitated for a moment, but they still picked up their phones and started recording. But while these people were watching and taking photos, no one noticed that Belle had pretended to be a tourist and sneaked into the exhibition hall. At the same time, using the crowd as cover, he came to the bucket water fountain here in the blind spot of the camera. He gently pulled the bucket off the water fountain, then took a bag of brown powder and poured it into the water. The powder melted after it was poured into the water. Then he gently put the bucket of water on the water fountain again and slowly prepared to leave from the back door. But halfway through, he found Willie Barton's body passing by the back door. Seeing this scene, Belle followed with a smirk on his face. Jiang Hai, who was watching Belle leave, also laughed in his heart. Now, what he had to do was to find a group of people to come down. Just as he was about to wait for the security guards to come down, suddenly, the phone in his pocket rang. So, he pretended to be angry and let go of Roland's shawlid. He picked up the phone and glanced at it. It turned out to be a call from Prar Walton. After thinking for a moment, Jiang Hai glared at him, then took the phone and walked out of the hall. Okay, let's disperse. Looking at Jiang Hai's helpless expression, Roland Salad couldn't help but smile proudly. Even if Jiang Hai guessed that he was the one who did it, what could he do? He still had to obediently let go of him. Thinking of this, Roland Salad couldn't help but raise his head proudly, but the scene just now was still very scary. He felt that he was almost beaten up. He was nervous before, so he didn't notice anything. Now that he was not nervous, he felt that his throat was a little tight, and he was a little thirsty. He glanced at the water dispenser in the distance, walked over, picked up a disposable paper cup, and drank it in one gulp. Hello, calling me at this time, what's the matter? On the other side, Jiang Hai, who walked out of the exhibition hall, also picked up the phone and asked Prar Walton on the other side of the phone. This phone call was indeed a good way to get out of the embarrassing situation, but Jiang Hai was indeed a little curious. It's nothing, I just went to your exhibition hall and found that you weren't there, so I called to ask about it. There's one more thing, a local wants to discuss a business with you. If it's convenient for you, you can come back. Listening to Jiang Hai's voice on the other side of the phone, Prar Walton followed him and spoke. Hearing that there was something going on in the exhibition hall, Jiang Hai also glanced at the SSR exhibition hall. He didn't know what would happen later. With a smile on his face, Jiang Hai walked towards his exhibition hall. While he was walking towards his exhibition hall, on the other side, Belle was quietly following Willie Barton. He wanted to see what this guy wanted to do. Willie Barton did not know that Belle was following him. Although he was very careful, he was not a professional. He walked and stopped all the way until he reached the cow shed where the cows used to be. It was where the cows stayed at night. Hey, Willie, you're here. As soon as Willie Barton walked to the cow shed, a voice came from inside. If Jiang Hai or Robbins Garcia were here, they would definitely recognize that voice. It was the voice of the cowboy who had a conflict with them. It seems that these people have already joined forces. Thinking about it, Jiang Hai was the enemy of all Texas cowboys. Is the thing ready? After hearing this man's words, Willie Barton also said eagerly. After hearing his words, the cowboy on the other side also replied immediately. Yes, it's not that good. Let's try it. It's all ready. This is the cow dung from the past few days, and it's been seasoned. A lot of our stuff is mixed in, hee hee. Hearing Willie Barton's words, the cowboy said disgustedly, but he didn't feel anything wrong at all. This time, let's teach those foreigners a lesson. How dare they look down on us? Ha, cough, this smell is too strong, I'll push it out first. Hearing the cowboy's words, Willie Barton couldn't help but speak a little louder. But just as he spoke a little louder, he inhaled the smell and couldn't help but retch. It was really too smelly. Willie Barton took out a mask and put it on his face. Then he pushed the cart out of the room. Looking at his figure, Belle couldn't help but sneer. This time, they will know what it means to reap what they sow. Thinking of this, Belle continued to follow him to the exhibition hall. At this time, Jiang Hai had returned to his exhibition hall. Because there was no smell, there were still some people in the exhibition hall at this time. Of course, the most important group of people was Pra Walton and her team. In addition, there were two men in front of her, an old man who looked about 60 years old and a middle-aged man who was about 40 years old. They were talking to Pra Walton at this time. After seeing Jiang Hai walk in, Pra Walton couldn't help but smile and waved at Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai couldn't help but walk in when he saw them. The researchers over there also took the initiative to walk over when they saw Jiang Hai. Mr. Jiang Hai, I have to admit that the cattle you raised are still perfect, even better than last year. You will definitely get a good result in this exhibition. Among them, the oldest researcher had been full of praise ever since he saw the cow. This was the most beautiful Angus cow he had ever seen. It was almost as if he had seen it in textbooks. It had perfect fur, perfect bone structure, perfect muscles, and most importantly, it had a trace of spirituality. This kind of cow was really amazing. I hope so too. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also smiled, then said to him, then came to Pra Walton's side. He was really curious, why did Pra Walton call him over? Hey, Jiang, your cattle here are still so good, haha. Seeing Jiang Hai coming over, Pra Walton said with a smile, but she couldn't help but laugh because she accompanied Jiang Hai to pick these cattle. Well, what's the matter? Looking at Pra Walton in front of him, Jiang Hai signaled with his eyes that there are other people here. Sure enough, under Jiang Hai's gaze, Pra Walton also withdrew her gaze and returned to her iceberg state. Come, let me introduce you. This is Luke Shawn, one of the top ranchers in Texas. His nature is not much different from yours. He is also a homeowner. In addition, he is also a businessman and has shares in many companies, such as Microsoft, Google. This is his son, Anthony Shawn. This is Jiang Hai. If you have anything to say, you can talk to him directly. After a brief introduction, Pra Walton let Jiang Hai and the others talk by themselves. It is inconvenient for her to intervene in some things. Hello, Mr. Jiang Hai. I've heard a lot about you. After hearing Pra Walton's introduction, Luke Shawn shook hands with Jiang Hai. Then his son, Anthony Shawn, also shook hands with Jiang Hai. When shaking hands, Jiang Hai felt very strange. What are these people doing? With all due respect, we don't seem to be very familiar with each other, so let's get straight to the point. May I know why you are looking for me? After hesitating for a while, Jiang Hai decided to say it directly. Otherwise, he would be a little depressed. Well, yes, this time we came to find Mr. Jiang Hai. It is indeed a little abrupt. Let me explain our purpose. We are looking for Mr. Jiang Hai mainly to buy fodder from Mr. Jiang Hai. Looking at Jiang Hai, Luke Shawn smiled and said to Jiang Hai. After hearing his words, Jiang Hai had some doubts. Buy fodder? I would like to ask, what is this for? Hearing his words, Jiang Hai felt a little strange. At present, only Du Feynman knew that he was selling fodder. How did he know? This made Jiang Hai somewhat puzzled. Coincidentally, we are one of the companies, so I know a little about your feed. The nutrition in your feed is really beyond our expectations. After cows eat your feed, as long as they are raised carefully, they can grow marbled beef. We are very interested in this, so we came here to buy your feed. I don't know if you are interested in this business. Looking at Jiang Hai, Luke Shan went straight to the point and asked Jiang Hai directly. After hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but stare blankly for a moment, then inwardly scolded Du Feynman, this idiot. Was he crazy? Didn't he know how to make a fortune in silence? Didn't he know to use his own royal institution to do the testing? Jiang Hai also posted it all over the world. It was impossible for Jiang Hai not to attract other people's attention. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh and shake his head. In a while, he would definitely make a call and ask this guy if his brain was damaged. In principle, I agree to sell the fodder. However, the price and quantity may be a little troublesome. After all, I also need to raise cattle in my manor. I have to ensure that my cattle are full before I can sell some. In addition, the quantity requested by Dubai is quite large, so it is difficult for me to directly agree here. After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai decided to call Du Feynman first to ask about the situation. If Du Feynman was really an idiot, then Jiang Hai could just not sell his feed in the future. At the same time, if he wanted to sell, he would have to discuss with Robbins Garcia and the others how much of the cattle and feed in the manor could be left. This is what we should do. We came here today to offer the intention of cooperation. I don't know when you can give us a reply. Seeing that Jiang Hai didn't say no and only said that he wanted to study it, Luke Shan didn't know that there was a chance. After doing business for so many years, he could see that Jiang Hai would sell his feed to anyone. What he said just now was also very particular. Although he didn't say anything bad about Dubai's royal family, it also faintly revealed that Dubai's royal family didn't seem to believe Jiang Hai. He was also burying a line between Jiang Hai and Du Feynman. If something really happened, then this line would be exposed. If nothing happened, then he wouldn't have any problems. These old guys who had lived for a long time weren't easy to deal with. Chapter 694. If there are no accidents, tomorrow will be fine. After thinking about it, Jiang Hai said to Luke Shan. He could actually do it this afternoon, but there was no need to rush. It was as if he cared about this deal, but in fact, Jiang Hai didn't care much about this. If that's the case, it's really great, then I'll come back tomorrow. Hearing that Jiang Hai gave a satisfactory answer, Luke Shan couldn't help but smile and say, then after a few polite words with Jiang Hai, the three shook hands and parted ways. When the two walked out of Jiang Hai's exhibition hall, Anthony Shan, who had hardly spoken, looked at his father. Father, I don't understand, why don't we study the composition of his grass and make it ourselves, or buy his ranch directly? Buying grass like this, when will it end? And the most important thing is that the lifeline is still in his hands. Looking at Luke Shan, Anthony Shan couldn't help but say with some doubts. To be honest, their family's power in Texas is almost the same as Jiang Hai's in Winthrop. They are basically like local tyrants. They can get whatever they want. This is the first time they have taken the initiative to seek cooperation. You don't understand, this Jiang Hai is very useful. Hearing his son's words, Luke Shan smiled and said mysteriously. I don't quite understand. Hearing Luke Shan's words, Anthony Shan couldn't help but mutter in a low voice. Child, you are still too young. This Jiang Hai can now sell grass so fearlessly, which means that he is absolutely sure that we can't copy the grass. Now we are seeking cooperation, first, to get closer to him, and second, to guard against the Middle East. You can't be naive to think that after the royal family of Dubai raised good beef, they will eat all of it themselves. That is more than 1 million cattle, and their target of dumping, if there is no accident, must be Europe and the United States. The high-end beef market in Asia has been occupied by Japan. When the time comes, I ask you, who will be the biggest hit? Looking at his son, Luke Shawn also said with a smile. Montana and us? After hesitating for a moment, Anthony Shawn's eyes lit up. After all, he was not a fool, and he was already in his 40s. He had been in the business world for more than 20 years. He could see very clearly. With just a little bit, he would understand. Oh, if we cooperate with Shanghai, we can keep our own market share and study the market outside. It's a win-win situation. The most important thing is that we can't figure out the secret of Shanghai's fodder now, but it doesn't mean that we can't do it in the future. By then. Hearing this, Anthony Shawn had completely figured it out. According to the Huaxia people, this is called the pavilion closest to the water enjoys the moonlight first. Hearing what his father said, Anthony Shawn also said with a smile. At this time, Shanghai didn't know about the wishful thinking of the father and son duo. In fact, even if he knew, he would probably just laugh disdainfully. They wanted to study the secrets of the grass. They are really blind. If they can figure it out, he can give it to them. But the problem is that there is only one Dragon Ball in this world, and that thing is in Shanghai's body. Unless they cut Shanghai into pieces and study it, it is absolutely impossible. Moreover, with Shanghai's current net worth of billions of dollars, the relationship between Shanghai and the Walmart Group, the relationship between Shanghai and the royal family of Dubai, and the relationship between Shanghai and Huaxia, unless Shanghai wants to die, no one dares to touch him. Especially in terms of personal safety. As for cattle, fish, and grass, they can study it if they want. As long as they don't go against the state agencies, Shanghai doesn't care, because he knows that they can't figure it out. And these people don't dare to go against him openly. After all, as they said, Shanghai still has the lifeline of their money. In the United States, everything is based on money. No one will go against money, including these people. I didn't intend to introduce this Luke Shawn to you, but I heard that you have some trouble recently, so I specially brought them here today. In Texas, their power is still very good. As long as they say a word, those people won't dare to trouble you. After watching Shanghai and Luke Shawn finish talking, Walton came over. No need, do I need others to take revenge? Hearing Walton's words, Shanghai couldn't help but be stunned. He originally thought that Walton called them here to introduce him to business, but now it seems that she has a deeper meaning. But it's useless to say this now, because Shanghai has decided to take revenge himself. Take revenge yourself? How are you going to do it? Hearing Shanghai's words, Walton asked with a puzzled look. You. Hey. Wait a minute. Seeing Walton's puzzled look, Shanghai wanted to say something, but at this moment, his phone rang. He picked it up and saw that the person who called was none other than Belle. But at this time, Belle seemed to be in a hurry. He only told Shanghai to go to the entrance of the SSR exhibition hall and watch the show, preferably far away, and then hung up the phone. Shanghai knows that this guy will definitely not say things without a reason. Let's go, I'll take you to watch the show. Since Belle said that there was a show to watch, Shanghai didn't hold back. He smiled and pulled Walton away. Regarding Shanghai and Walton leaving the exhibition hall, whether it was Shanghai's people or the people from the Walmart Group, they were not surprised. Because they all knew that Shanghai and Walton had a close relationship. Forget about dragging them out, even if they went to a hotel and booked a room, they would not be surprised. Where are we going? After Shanghai pulled her out of the exhibition hall, Walton asked in confusion. Follow me and you'll know. After talking to Walton, Shanghai quickly pulled her to the entrance of the SSR exhibition hall. It had been about half an hour since the last time he left, and in this half an hour, the effect of the drug had just taken effect. Ouch, what's going on? At this time, Roland Shalid was sitting in the lounge, waiting for Willie Barton's news. He suddenly felt a little pain in his intestines. As the saying goes, a stomachache is not an illness, it's just that he didn't poop properly. In addition, he was a little nervous now. At first, he thought that it was because he was nervous, so he wanted to go to the toilet. But later, when he felt his stomach hurt more and more, he felt that he might really need to go to the toilet. How could he care so much? So when his stomach growled again, he stood up and walked out of his room to go to the bathroom. But when he arrived in front of the bathroom, he saw that the bathroom was full of people. Ouch, boss. Do you need to go to the bathroom too? Suddenly, an employee walked over while clutching his stomach. He looked at Roland Shalid and grinned. What? What's going on? Roland Shalid was a little confused when he saw the employee's reaction. I don't know, it seems like the food we ate this morning wasn't clean, all the employees have diarrhea. This is my 4th time. Ouch, come out quickly, I can't hold it in anymore. When the employee heard Roland Shalid's words, he suddenly squeezed his butt and quickly walked to the bathroom door. He knocked on the door, but the person inside didn't even open it. Yes, Jiang Hai's attack was indiscriminate. The people who drank the bucket of water were mainly the employees of SSR. They prepared bottled water for the guests because these people weren't ordinary tourists. They were people who might buy their cows, so they naturally treated them well. The bottled water they drank was imported from Europe. The employees weren't allowed to drink the bottled water, so they drank the drugged bucket of water. Roland Shalid was actually quite lucky because he had been sitting in his office for more than half an hour. But the employees were different. They had to explain and promote to these people, so they wasted a lot of saliva. Naturally, they were thirsty. So they drank more, and the more they drank, the faster they reacted. There was now a long line in front of the bathroom. Looking at these people, Roland Shalid couldn't help but lick his lips. If this was in other countries, if a leader like him wanted to go to the toilet, even if the people inside didn't finish their business, some people would take the initiative to flatter him and give up their seats. However, this was the United States, a country that emphasized human rights. Therefore, no one would give up their seats for him. It was also somewhat embarrassing for him to fight for the bathroom with the employees. However, looking at these people who were having diarrhea, he felt that the idea that he could have held back for a while seemed to have disappeared without a trace. Now, he seemed to be unable to hold it in any longer. He looked around and decided to go to the bathroom in the exhibition hall next door. So he tidied up his suit and walked out of the exhibition hall with a proud face. But at this time, Jiang Hai and Prawalton also came over. They immediately saw Roland Shalid, so they knew each other. He's the one who wants to mess with you? Prawalton pointed at Roland Shalid in surprise. Hey, it's him. Look at my revenge. Hearing Prawalton's words, Jiang Hai smiled, then wrinkled his nose and took a few steps back. His extraordinary sense of smell smelled something that shouldn't be smelled. Although Prawalton didn't smell anything, she also took a step back because she believed in Jiang Hai. At this moment, the sound of a trolley came from a distance, and on the trolley, there was a pile of stinky things, emitting a smell. When the pedestrians on the road smelled this smell, they subconsciously moved away, then looked at the cowboy who was pushing the trolley with a puzzled face. Looking at this cowboy, Jiang Hai grinned, because he knew that this cowboy was Bell, but Bell didn't wear his own set of clothes. Instead, he changed into Willie Barton's original clothes, a shabby cowboy suit, and the bandage on his right arm was exactly the same, but the low brim of his hat exposed his existence. Huh. As the trolley got closer and closer, Roland Shalid had just walked out of the exhibition hall when he smelled the stench. Seeing the trolley rushing towards him, he was scared out of his wits, and the trolley was directly pushed towards him. Oh my God. Roland Shalid, who had been focusing most of his energy on fighting against his intestines, screamed in fright when he saw the cart coming towards him. He wanted to run away, but as soon as he moved, he heard a long sound of a flute coming from the lower part of his body, followed by a cracking sound. He felt that his pants had become heavier without him realizing it. More importantly, after eating the croton seeds, the yellow liquid instantly flowed down his trousers. But before anyone could notice that he had been scared out of his wits, Roland's salad heard a loud sound coming from the lower part of his body, followed by a cracking sound. He felt that his pants had become heavier. More importantly, after eating the croton seeds, the yellow liquid instantly flowed down his trousers. The trolley was already pushed over. Without saying a word, the pile of human, cow, and some unknown creatures, which could not be described because it was too disgusting, was poured directly on his body. Then Jiang Hai saw Belle pretend to be very panicked. After apologizing in a thick Texas accent, he quickly squeezed out of the crowd and disappeared, leaving Roland Shalide standing in the middle of a pile of feces. Roland Shalide was still pooping on the side. For a moment, the smell of himself and the smell of cow dung made everyone in the area run away. The nearby exhibition halls also closed their doors. It was as if Roland's salad was the only person left in the world. Of course, there were also a lot of surveillance cameras. Willie Barton, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to kill you. Ugh. Ah. Looking at the pile of excrement on his body, face, and even the corners of his mouth, he shouted loudly while standing in the middle of the pile of excrement. As soon as he opened his mouth, a few flies flew to the right place, causing him to retch instantly. At the same time, he lost his balance and fell in the middle of the pile of excrement. At the same time, new excrement was constantly being created behind him. Ugh, this is your revenge. No, I have to go back first, it's too disgusting. Pra Walton looked at the scene in front of her from a distance, her eyes full of surprise. Jiang Hai was really too careless and disgusting. She was about to throw up, looking at Pra Walton running away. Jiang Hai scratched his head. He did not expect the effect to be so good. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.